serve as a natural buffer against hurricanes, absorbing storm surge and reducing the impact of flooding. However, decades of human activity, including oil and gas exploration, levee construction, and land development, had already significantly degraded these wetlands before Katrina struck. The storm accelerated this process, causing substantial erosion and further weakening the region's natural defenses. The loss of wetlands and barrier islands increased the vulnerability of the Gulf Coast to future storms. In the years following Katrina, efforts to restore these critical ecosystems have been a priority for environmentalists and policymakers. However, the scale of the damage is vast, and restoring the region's natural defenses will be a long and costly process. Water contamination and public health concerns. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, water contamination became a major public health concern, particularly in New Orleans. The flooding caused by the storm overwhelmed the city's sewage and drainage systems, leading to the discharge of raw sewage, industrial chemicals, and hazardous materials into the floodwaters. The toxic mix of chemicals, debris, and waste posed serious health risks to residents and rescue workers, including exposure to bacteria, mold, and hazardous chemicals. Many homes and buildings that were flooded developed mold infestations, creating long-term health concerns for those who returned to the city in the months and years following the storm. The environmental damage caused by Hurricane Katrina highlighted the need for stronger environmental regulations and disaster preparedness measures to protect vulnerable communities from the long-term health and environmental consequences of natural disasters. Recovery and rebuilding, a tale of two cities. The recovery and rebuilding efforts following Hurricane Katrina were marked by stark contrasts. While some areas, particularly wealthier and Weatehr neighborhoods, recovered relatively quickly, others, particularly low-income and predominantly Black neighborhoods, faced a slow and uneven recovery. Rebuilding New Orleans, successes and failures. In the years following Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans embarked on an ambitious rebuilding effort, with a focus on infrastructure improvements, economic revitalization, and cultural preservation. The city's tourism industry, a key driver of its economy, gradually rebounded as major cultural landmarks, such as the French Quarter and Bourbon Street, were restored. However, the recovery of New Orleans was far from uniform. While wealthier neighborhoods, such as the Garden District and Uptown, saw rapid rebuilding, poorer neighborhoods, such as the Lower Ninth Ward, languished. The Lower Ninth Ward, which had been one of the hardest-hit areas during the storm, remained largely abandoned for years, with many residents unable to return due to a lack of affordable housing and inadequate government support. The slow pace of rebuilding in low-income neighborhoods highlighted deep racial and economic disparities in the city's recovery. Many residents of these neighborhoods felt abandoned by the government and excluded from the decision-making process, leading to widespread frustration and disillusionment. The role of nonprofits and community organizations. In the absence of adequate government support, many nonprofit organizations and community groups played a critical role in the recovery process. Organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, the Louisiana Disaster Recovery Foundation, and local grassroots groups provided much-needed resources and support to displaced residents, helping to rebuild homes, provide legal assistance, and advocate for the rights of marginalized communities. These organizations also played a key role in preserving the cultural heritage of New Orleans, particularly its vibrant music and arts scenes. Efforts to support local musicians, artists,
Is Wendy still talking? Wendy, take a break. Wendy, take a break. Wendy, please take a break. Okay, I think she's on her break. Go get something to drink and something to eat, Wendy. You deserve it. You've been going nonstop. Okay, let's see what we got here for alerts. I have a feeling we got a lot of flash flooding. Looks like a lot of flooding just in the southern part of West Virginia, middle of Virginia, and still a little bit up there near Rocky Mount, North Carolina. But let's go over and see what we have exactly. First, let's get to our special weather statement. This here Doppler radar was tracking a strong thunderstorm over Old Ford near Washington. This thunderstorm was nearly stationary. Hazard, wind gusts up to 50 miles an hour. Radar indicated. Impact gusty winds could knock down tree limbs and blow around unsecured objects. Locations impacted include. Let me get the right glasses on. There we go. Radars impacted include Washington, Old Ford, Washington Park, Grimesland, and Smithwick. Precautionary preparedness action. If outdoors, consider seeking shelter inside a building. Torrential rainfall is also occurring with the storm and may lead to localized flooding. Do not drive your vehicle through flooded roadways. This storm may intensify, so be certain to monitor local radio stations and available television stations for additional information and possible warnings from the National Weather Service. And that covers the counties of Beaufort, Pitt, and Martin, North Carolina. Let's move up here to flash flood warnings, and we have a bunch of them. Looks like we have 11 currently. Let me update the little ticker guy here to reflect the correct number. There we go. We are currently at 11 flash flood warnings. Most of these, again, are in Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina. Looks like for the next 4 hours and 26 minutes, we are under a flash flood warning for the counties of Monroe and Greenbrier, West Virginia. For the next 3 hours and 56 minutes, it looks like Campbell, Virginia, Bedford, Pennsylvania, and Franklin, Virginia. For the next 3 hours and 26 minutes, Franklin, Virginia. I'm not sure why they have it on there twice. They must have grouped it together with the counties of Campbell, Bedford, and Pennsylvania. Interesting. Okay. For the next 2 hours and 41 minutes, we have a flash flood warning for the counties of Bertie and Martin, North Carolina. And it looks like that was an extension of the one that was issued for 2 hours and 11 minutes. A couple more counties in Virginia have a flash flood warning for 26 more minutes. Fluvanna, Cumberland, and Buckingham, Virginia. 26 more minutes there. If those get extended, I will definitely let you know. So that's what we have there. I'm going to zoom into a couple of these areas in case the folks aren't familiar exactly where these counties are. Let me zoom in here really quick. Get a better look at the radar. We still have rain coming down in all these areas, it looks like. Let me jump over to the radar that's just south of Roanoke. This should give us the West Virginia and the Central Virginia areas that are being affected by these flash floods. So if we zoom in a little bit here, you can see a little bit better. Let me put it on 21 frames and move it forward here a little bit so we can see the direction of the storm and how it's progressed over the last hour or so. It looks like if you're familiar with the town of Lewisburg and Princeton, it's just to the northeast of Princeton and just to the whole area surrounding Lewisburg, all the way down to the Virginia state line. There's still a little bit of moderate rain coming down there. Most of it's light. There's a couple spots of moderate rain crossing over Interstate 64 over Lewisburg right now. Again, this is right along the West Virginia state line there. And then if we move a little bit farther over the state line into almost south central Virginia, the largest town down there is going to be either Rocky Mount or Lynchburg. There's a flash flood warning for Rocky Mount. Again, you can see there's moderate to light rain coming down over Rocky Mount. Currently, that looks like Highway 220. And then just north of Martinsburg, there's a little bit of heavier rain between Martinsburg and Rocky Mount, flowing up towards Alta Vista. The town of Alta Vista is also under a flash flood warning that falls into the counties there in Virginia, which I will cover here again really quick. This is for flash flood warning for Campbell County and Central Virginia, southeastern Bedford County and South Central Virginia, northwestern Pennsylvania County and South Central Virginia, east central Franklin County and West Central Virginia. And this is until 12:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Those are the flash flood warnings we have there. And I'll just go ahead and reread the warning that was issued by the National Weather Service at 6:12 p.m. Let me adjust that really quick. There we go. Excellent. Doppler radar indicated thunderstorms producing heavy rain across the warning area. Up to 2 inches of rain have fallen. Additional rainfall amounts up to 1 inch are possible in the warning area. Flash flooding is ongoing or expected to begin shortly. Hazard, obviously, flash flood. Flash flooding caused by these thunderstorms. Source, radar. Impact, flash flooding of small creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets, underpasses, as well as other drainage and low-lying areas. Some locations that will be experiencing flash flooding include Alta Vista, Evington, Concord, Hodges, Hurt, Russburg, and Pinhook. This includes the following streams and drainages: Buffalo Branch, Carter Mill Creek, Beaver Pond Branch, Big Otter River, Buffalo Creek, Bear Creek, Bottom Creek, and Burden Creek and Bat Creek. And again, that's in South Central Virginia. Right here in the middle of the screen. Let's move up the map a little bit just to make sure we didn't miss anything up there. It doesn't look like there's any flash flood warnings up there. The rest of them, I think, are going to be all down here in Virginia. What is this one right here? That's the special weather statement for the next 19 minutes. Let me just go ahead and go over that really quickly. This one is for wind gusts up to 50 miles an hour. Radar indicated. Gusty winds can knock down tree limbs and blow around unsecured objects. Locations impacted include Washington, Old Ford, Washington Park, Grimesland, and Smithwick. If outdoors, consider seeking shelter inside a building. Torrential rainfall is also occurring with this storm and may lead to localized flooding. Do not drive your vehicles through flooded roadways. The storm may intensify, so be certain to monitor local radio stations and available television stations for additional information and possible warnings from the National Weather Service. That was issued at 8:10 Eastern Standard Time and goes for the next 19 minutes. I'm going to move over here just to the northwest for the area that's being covered in the flash flood warning up here in North Carolina. It looks like the town of Robersonville, Williamston, Windsor, and I'll go over the counties here. This is for the next 2 hours and 32 minutes. Again, this is a flash flood warning from the National Weather Service in Wakefield, Virginia, issued at 7:51 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, September 30th. The National Weather Service in Wakefield has issued a flash flood warning for Bertie County in northeastern North Carolina until 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's see here. At 7:51 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Doppler radar indicated thunderstorms producing heavy rain across the warned area. Up to 3 inches of rain have fallen. The expected rainfall rate is 1.5 to 3 inches in 1 hour. Additional rainfall amounts of 1 to 3 inches are possible in the warned area. Flash flood warning is ongoing or expected to begin shortly. Hazard flash flooding caused by thunderstorms. Source is radar. Impact. Flash flooding of small creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets, and underpasses, as well as other poor drainage and low-lying areas. Some locations that will experience flash flooding include Windsor, Lewistown or Lewiston, Woodville. And let's see here. This is just saying what to do, not what not to do. Turn around, don't drown when encountering flooded roads. Pretty much common sense stuff. If you see a flooded road, don't attempt to cross it. If you do come across a flooded area that hasn't been reported, feel free to call 757-899-2415. Posting to the National Weather Service Wakefield Facebook page or Twitter at NWS Wakefield VA. It's pretty good. Again, just to cover again the amount of rainfall they're expecting over the next hour in this area, anywhere between 1.5 to 3 inches of rain. So that's a lot of rain to drop in one little area. So please be cautious out there. This one is a considerable damage threat, flash flood warning. I want to cover this one really quick, and this one's going to be for the next 2 hours. Let's see here. This was issued at 7:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today on the 30th. It says here that the National Weather Service in Newport/Morehead City has issued a flash flood warning for Martin County and eastern North Carolina until 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At 7:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Doppler radar indicated thunderstorms producing heavy rains across the warned area. Between 2 and 4 inches of rain have fallen. Additional rainfall amounts of 2 to 4 inches are possible in the warned areas. Flash flooding is ongoing and expected to begin shortly. Hazard, life-threatening flash floods, thunderstorms producing flash floods. Source was radar. Impact, life-threatening flash floods of creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets, and underpasses. Some locations that will experience flash flooding include Williamston, Robertsonville, Gold Point, Hamilton, Oak City, Parmley, Everett's, Hassel, and Beargrass. Turn around, don't drown when encountering flooded roads. Most flood deaths occur in vehicles. Be especially cautious at night when it is harder to recognize the dangers of flooding. Absolutely. All right, let's move back over a little bit to the south central part of the state. And it looks like this is in the Fayetteville area and everything to the north up to Cary. Again, this is a special weather statement for the next 28 minutes. It says at 8:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Doppler radar was tracking gusty showers along the line extending from near Fuquay, Varana to 6 miles northeast of Pope Air Force Base to Rayford. Movement was east at 15 miles per hour. Hazard, wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Source, radar indicated. Gusty winds can knock down tree limbs and blow around unsecured objects. Locations impacted include Fayetteville, Rayford, Lillington, Fort Liberty, Gardner, Varana, Dunn, Anger, Benson, and Godwin. Precautionary preparedness actions. If indoors, consider seeking shelter inside a building. Doppler radar has indicated weak rotation with the showers northeast of Pope Air Force Base. If the storm intensifies and rotation straightens, a warning may be issued. Again, this was issued at 8:22 Eastern Time and is expected to last another 28 minutes. So just about a half an hour. Let me zoom out here and see what else we have. North Carolina. Let me check another radar out here to the west and see what the rain looks like there. It's not too bad. The little bit of rain there is light. It doesn't even look like it's in the moderate range. Jump back over to KRAX, just to the east of Cary. And as you can see, we have light rain over by Cary, Durham, Fayetteville. And then as you go over to the east near Greenville, Kinston, Elizabeth City, Edenton, and it looks like there's a little bit up there by Red Oak also, north of Rocky Mount. Most of that rain over there is in the moderate range. I don't see any intense rain. There might be a little bit just down to the south of Kinston blowing east. Look a little bit closer here. That should be crossing over into the Pamlico River and blowing out to the Atlantic here probably within the next hour. There's a little bit of moderate to heavyish rain over there near Washington. I don't see any lightning coming from the storm. Let me just put it in motion to see if there's anything there. Radar isn't indicating any lightning in that area currently. So that's one good thing about it. But it is dumping a lot of rain over the next hour. I believe that warning said anywhere from 1/2 inch to 3 inches over the next hour, and 2 to 4 inches have already fallen. So very dangerous area right there as far as flash flooding. So please be cautious if you're over there. Remember, turn around, don't drown. It's very dangerous. There's one little part over here I want to get. It looks like is this Swan Quarter? It does look like it's raining really heavy. I'm not sure. There's a little island right off Swan Quarter. I'm not sure if there's a name for that island, but it's just to the south of Swan Quarter. There's some really heavy rain going over it right now. Almost hail indicated, but not quite. It's just really heavy. So if you're over there near Pamlico Sound, be cautious if you're on the boat or near just to the south of Lake Matam Matamuskie, I guess it's pronounced, or Matamuskeet. Perhaps that's the way it's pronounced there. And then again, it's blowing up here into Virginia Beach. It looks pretty light to moderate rain right now, more on the light side. There's not a flash flood warning currently in effect for Virginia Beach at this point. And it's mainly over here to the west of Richmond. Again, this is covering Lynchburg, Alta Vista, north of Farmville, and then back over into West Virginia. Looks like one of the flash floods did get lifted, but this one still has another 4 hours and 9 minutes on it. And this is expected to be another 1 to 2 inches within the next hour. And I'll go over the areas again really quick. This is for South Central Greenbrier County and Southeastern West Virginia, Central Monroe County and Southeastern West Virginia. And this is in effect until 12:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Wow, that's a lot of rain. That's a lot of rain. I think what's happening is that there was so much rain that fell in those mountains. They're all obviously gravity is pulling it down through the rivers and streams, and it's collecting in the low-lying areas. So we can zoom in. I'm not sure how good this is going to show up on stream, but if we zoom in really close here, just all that area on Interstate 64. Let me pull up the little drawing tool right here. This is all mountains right here. And then if I change the color to yellow, all the areas in yellow are the low-lying areas right here. So if you can see right here, there's a river right there. Right there, these yellow lines. These are all little rivers, and there's probably a bunch of streams right here. There's a big one right there. All the rain that's falling up in the mountains are obviously being pulled down by gravity, and they're going into the low-lying areas, and then the rain doesn't have anywhere to go. It's going to accumulate there. If you're over there, please be careful. Very dangerous. I'm going to pull up the temperature radar really quick and see how our temperatures look around. I haven't updated the temperatures up at the top, the on the top ticker yet. Excuse me. I'll be updating that shortly. I want to pull up the national map and go over the current temperatures really fast. We'll hit the major cities. I'm just waiting for it to load up here. Let me get in here to the temperatures. Here's our dew point. And let me get the temperatures to pull up here. There's so many cool maps on here. you haven't had a chance yet, pull up windy.com. It's really neat. All the different options you have and all the different things that you can actually see on here. Really cool. For some reason, it's not loading up the temperatures. Let me see if I can get it to refresh here. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to refresh for me. Let me mess around with some of the settings really quick. There's the wind reported, recorded temperature. That's a little too tight. Let's zoom out a little bit and see if we can get at least the major cities. All right. There we go. Perfect. All right. I'm going to start in the northwest and just work our way down to the southwest, through the south, up the east coast, and then back across the United States over to the west again. So starting up here in Washington State, up near Spokane, it looks like it's 59 currently. Portland, Oregon looks like it's 73. Medford, Oregon looks like it's 73. San Jose looks like it's 93. Los Angeles, 89. Moving over to Arizona, Phoenix is 104 degrees right now in Phoenix, Arizona. Incredible. Down in southern Utah, it's 75. Up to the north in Salt Lake City, it's 73. Denver, Colorado is currently at 70 degrees. Down in Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's 89. Moving over to Texas and Lubbock, it's 88. Dallas is also 88. Houston is 86. Jumping over to Arkansas, Fayetteville looks like it's 79. New Orleans down in Louisiana, 82 degrees. Jackson, Mississippi is 79. What city is that? That's a little zoomed out too far. There we go. Birmingham, Alabama is 73 degrees. Montgomery, Alabama, 77. Looks like Atlanta, Georgia is 73 currently. Moving down into Florida, Tallahassee is 82. Destin is 80. Tampa Bay is 82. Cape Coral is 88. Palm Bay is 84. Daytona Beach is 84. Jacksonville, Florida is 79. Moving back up into Georgia, Savannah is 80. And then up into South Carolina, Florence is 79. Anderson is 71. North Carolina, Charlotte currently is 75. Raleigh is 75. Up into Virginia, Virginia Beach is 70. Richmond currently is 64. Roanoke is 70. Washington, D.C. is 66. Moving up the coast a little bit more, Atlantic City, New Jersey is 68. New York is 66. Reading, Pennsylvania is 64. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is 64. Utica, New York, 64 degrees. Up there in Vermont, it is 61. New Hampshire is 62. Boston is reporting 62 degrees. Moving back over, going westward. Let's see here. Columbus, Ohio is showing 68. Detroit, Michigan is 66. Grand Rapids, Michigan is 68. Green Bay, Wisconsin, 73. Woodruff, Wisconsin, 70. Elroy, 73. Moving over into Minnesota. Looks like St. Paul is 71. Down in Iowa, Des Moines is 80. And let's jump back down here to Kentucky and Tennessee. Knoxville, Tennessee is 70. Up in Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky is 70. Over in Illinois, Springfield is 73. St. Louis, Missouri is 75. Jumping over to Kansas, Wichita is reporting 84. Dodge City, 82. Down in Oklahoma City, they're reporting 82. Bartersville, Oklahoma is 79. Boise City, Oklahoma is 88. Jumping up into Nebraska, Omaha is 79. North Platte is 68. South Dakota, looks like Sioux Falls is right around 66. Up into North Dakota right now, most temperatures are up there in the 50s. Grand Forks is 57. Winds moving from the northwest. Montana, it looks like everything is pretty much in the 50s in the whole state. Up in Missoula, it's actually 61. Moving over to Idaho, Twin Falls is reporting 61. Boise, Idaho is reporting 66. And that covers just about everywhere. Las Vegas, I skipped that one. That one is 102 degrees right now. And it is 6:44 mountain time where that one's So that pretty much covers the temperatures all over the United States. I'll update the ticker up the top at the top of the screen here, right around 15 after the hour. I'll get that updated with most current temperatures. So that covers our temperatures and our current warnings that we have, our flash flood warnings. I'm going to pull up tomorrow's outlook and see what we're looking like here. Find out where our rainfalls are indicated and where our heaviest rainfall might be. Let's go up here, pull up tomorrow's, and there we go. All right, starting down here in the southwest, general thunder warning. Looks like severe thunderstorms are not expected on Tuesday in the southwest. Scattered thunderstorms are possible afternoon across central Florida peninsula, where a moderate buoyant air mass persists. A low amplified upper impulse will pass to its north across the southeast, but deep layer shears is expected to remain weak in combination with marginal mid-level lapse rates. The severe storm threat appears negligible. Let's see. Across northern North Carolina to the far southeast of Virginia, a weakening shortwave through will persist across the region and offshore Tuesday evening night. Isolated thunderstorms will remain possible through the afternoon. Over to the central Great Lakes, a vigorous shortwave through will move across on the way they word this is crazy. And I think a computer must have generated this. Maybe it was Wendy. I think Wendy's secretly working for the National Weather Service, by the way they word this. Let's go up here into the Detroit, Ohio, and Indiana area. Again, this is general thunder risk. Severe thunderstorms are not expected on Tuesday. Scattered thunderstorms are possible on Tuesday across, again, central Florida. And again, this is a general thunder. And then down here into Florida, let's see what we have here. Scattered thunderstorms, pretty much it. Let's look at the cloud cover for tomorrow. Let's see where we can expect those at. I'll pull up the current model right now. Let's go to the handy dandy her and see how far that's going out right now. Not too bad. Okay, this is what it looked like at 7 o'clock right here, our cloud cover. Moving on to 8 p.m. Should be a little bit more crossing over into western Pennsylvania. It's staying steady in central and eastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina. There's a little bit out there to the western North Carolina, out near Charlotte. Moving forward another hour, it looks like some clouds are gathering, possible rain just to the northeast of Santa Fe. And cloud cover in Phoenix. Those Santa Fe storms or rain starts to break up. Looks like they're intensifying a little bit just over central Virginia as the rest of it that was in the east and Washington, D.C. area blow out to the Atlantic. This is 11 o'clock. It looks like we got a little bit of rain blowing down from Canada coming into Wisconsin. Let's see if that comes down farther in the next hour. And now it's moving more to the northwest, like it's going to be moving towards Michigan, but it's probably going to take many hours to get there. And right over Tampa Bay, it looks like there's a little bit of light rain going on there. This is at 1 a.m. tomorrow morning. Here's 2 a.m. Rain starting to get a little bit stronger around the Richmond, Virginia area. Most of the storms that were over Washington, D.C. have blown out to the Atlantic. And it looks like it's getting a little bit stronger rain over central Pennsylvania. Again, that's at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. Let's move along to 3, and everything pretty much looks the same. The skies now look clear over Arizona and New Mexico. The storms that are coming from Canada are still moving to the southwest down into Michigan. They haven't quite reached there by 3 a.m. They're still over the lakes. Most of the rain that was over Pennsylvania have now pretty much all are considered light rain right there. So expect some fog in the morning. Right around 4 a.m., pretty much a lot of the same. The storms that are coming down from Canada have almost reached into northern Michigan. Let's move forward one more hour to 5 a.m. And the storms are still blowing down from Canada. The storms that are in central Virginia around Richmond are still pretty consistent. They look light to moderate. They haven't really picked up much over the last hour. Moving forward to 6 a.m. Looks like there's a little bit of rain over in north central Kansas, right around 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. A little bit of low pressure over there, and low pressure across the Carolinas and Kentucky. Let's move forward to 7 a.m. Now the rain is really starting to blow into Michigan that's coming down from Canada. It's starting to take more of a direct southern route opposed to the southwest route that it was taking around 1 a.m. Let's check over here. Okay, there we go. There's 8 a.m. I'm going to zoom in over here just so you can see a little bit better. There's nothing really going on out to the west. There's no reason to be looking at that right there. Let me zoom in. This is when most people are going to be either almost to work or headed to work right here over in Philadelphia, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, and North Carolina. You can see most of this rain over here is light to moderate. And let's jump forward to 9 a.m. Again, the majority of the rain seems to be focused right over to the south of Richmond, Virginia, blowing east towards Virginia Beach. Let's jump forward 1 hour to 10 a.m. And again, pretty much the same. Moderate to light rain to the south of Richmond, Virginia, blowing east to Virginia Beach. There's a little bit of rain. It just blew out of Pittsburgh. Again, that's very light rain over there. Harrisburg, Virginia, blowing into Philadelphia. Again, light rain. A little bit heavier rain up near Harrisburg, Virginia, blowing northeast. Looks like it's going to eventually make its way to Washington, D.C., and then blow into Maryland. 1 more hour to 11 a.m. Pretty much a lot of the same. Most of the rain that's over Virginia is still moving towards Virginia Beach. There may be a little bit of heavy rain down there, just to the south of Richmond at the 11 o'clock hour tomorrow. And now there's a little bit of rain developing just to the east of Charleston, West Virginia at that point. Should be blowing over the mountains into Virginia over the next few hours, probably afternoon. And as far as I can go right here is noon tomorrow. It looks like, again, rain right along the North Carolina Virginia border, south of Richmond and west of Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach around noon should be getting some rain. They're also, let me move back up here to Indianapolis. Actually, it's just to the northwest of Indianapolis, closer to Logansport. Looks like there's going to be a little bit of light to moderate rain. And now that rain has really dipped down from Canada. Remember around 1 a.m., it was just to the tip up there across the lake. Now it's really dipped down into the central part of the state, just to the west of Flint and almost to Lansing by noon. All the rain that's going to be along Interstate 95 tomorrow is light to moderate. It looks like the rain that's blowing into Flint at this point is going to be light to moderate rain, kind of scattered around a little bit there, just crossing over Interstate 75. Eventually, I'm imagining probably within the next 3 to 4 hours, it'll be crossing through Sandusky, Flint, Clinton Township, Ann Arbor, and Detroit. So that's all the way, that keeps you current all the way up to noon tomorrow. Other than that, there really isn't a whole lot going on. I'm hoping that those flash flood warnings will be lifted at that point. But unfortunately, I think throughout the night, we're going to get a lot more flooding. So many people have been impacted up there in Virginia and North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, even reports in Tennessee, Kentucky, but really up there in southwestern or southeastern West Virginia, all the rain is coming down the mountains through the rivers and the streams to the low-lying areas. And so many areas in Virginia have been impacted by the flooding. So terrible situation there. That's the effects of the hurricane. So that's what happens. Unfortunately, most of the news only covers, they all want to know where the eye of the storm is and where it's going to make landfall. But, it really does cause some damage there. But the folks up north that get the leftover of the storm are really reaping the damage, the real damage of the storm. So keep those people in your thoughts and prayers, and hopefully everybody else comes through that just fine. Let's see what else we got here. So that's our outlook for tomorrow through the afternoon. Let me go back to our current radar and see what's going on. Oops, do that. Pull this up here. There we go. I'm just curious. I'm going to check down here in Tallahassee really quick. Columbia, South Carolina. There we go. This is pretty much what we're looking at right now. And it looks pretty much the same as it did a half an hour ago. Over near Lynchburg, Roanoke, that's where our rain is at. Our flash flooding, of course, over into southeastern West Virginia. We still have flash flood in effect there. A little bit of rain right on the Florida, West Virginia border. Let me get down to the Jacksonville radar site. Okay, that's good. And then over here, most of the rain, it looks like it's blowing to the east northeast right now. So that should be blowing out to sea here within the next few hours in North Carolina. Virginia still has a few more hours of rain blowing from Lynchburg and Roanoke out to the east, eventually blowing over Virginia Beach area and over in the Atlantic coast of Maryland, crossing over the Chesapeake Bay and blowing out to the Atlantic over the next 5 to 6 hours, it looks like. So that's pretty much all that we have going on right now. I'm going to put the map in motion here for about 14 frames and see how we look over the last hour or so. It's almost an hour. Actually, let me take it back about an hour and a half. There. And you can see how those storms are moving currently and progressing out to the Atlantic. It looks like more of it's really growing over there just to the west of Richmond. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out. We'll have to see if that starts to intensify a little bit. Excellent. All right. Well, we are up to date on the weather for today. We've taken a look at tomorrow's outlook through noon, which will be October the 1st. And if anything changes in the next couple hours, I'll break in and update you guys. Right now, I'm going to go up to the top here and update our ticker to get current temperatures as of 8 p.m. Central Time. And while I do that, I'll throw on some interesting facts about hurricanes. I think Wendy's had enough of a break. I'm going to put her back to work here talking about hurricanes while I update the ticker at the top. Hope everybody had a great day and has a great day tomorrow. If you have any questions or concerns about your weather in your area, feel free to put it in chat and I will check it out. If I missed one of your comments, forgive me, but I'm going to be updating some of the forecast for tomorrow. Um, and I will see you guys in a little bit. Hey, how's it going, Jesse? How are you doing today? I'm just getting ready to fix the ticker up here, get our current weather temperatures as they are a few hours old. These will be current as of 8 p.m. Central Time. Let me pull up my little map here. Do, do. Doing awesome here, man. Just about over this upper respiratory infection I had going that had me coughing like a banshee over the last week. Finally got some finally went in and saw the doctor and got some medication for it, so it should be clearing up here. It's a huge difference already. Feel so much better. My chest, all that stuff is pretty much out of my chest. Just got a little bit left in my head, so my voice is coming back to normal. I'm about 80% of the way there, so I imagine over the next day and a half, I should have my voice back to normal. So Been having Wendy do most of the heavy lifting for me. She's been doing some documentary stuff about hurricanes and tornadoes and missing people on stream for me. So that's pretty awesome. Gotta love that. I think the live stream tonight is going to be usually I start the live stream around midnight for Wendy, and she does either something related to the weather or interesting facts or something like that. And she usually talks about 4 hours at a tick. I'll have her going tonight. I'm not sure which show I'm going to put on it. I'm either going to leave on the hurricane. That was a pretty highly requested one. The hurricane one, typhoons. I have one already typed up for the tornadoes and the 10 most interesting um, missing persons. That was a really good one. A lot of people gave me some awesome feedback on that one. They really liked that one. So I might replay that one tonight. That was pretty popular. So, all right, let me get my weather map out here for areas and start updating our temperatures. Whoops. Bear with me. Sorry about that. All right. What's the temperature out there in Seattle? Looks like it's 66 right now. Let's change that. Spokane is 68. Portland looks like it's 73 right now. Change that one. Reno, Nevada. Where are you, Reno, Nevada? What's your temperature right now? Reno is 79. Get that guy changed. San Jose, where are you? What is your temperature? Looks like San Jose is checking in at 91, 91 degrees. And San Jose, California. Los Angeles, where are you? You are currently reporting. Are we getting a report from Los Angeles? Los Angeles, are you reporting? Looks like we're at 89. Just make sure. Yep, 89 in Los Angeles. Sounds beautiful right now. Phoenix, Arizona. I know you're up there in the triple digits probably, but let me just double check. Flagstaff is only 75, but it's 93 degrees down between Prescott and Flagstaff. That's interesting. Tucson is still reporting triple digits. Let's go down here. A lot of triple digits down there near Yuma. Looks like it's topping out at 104. And oh no, wow, Brawley, California, 107 degrees. That looks like our high temperature in the country right now is Brawley, California. Interesting stuff. That's really hot. And it's almost, if it's central time here, that's 2 hours behind 6 o'clock. It's still 107 degrees. That's incredible. That's got to be the highest temperature in North America right now. Crazy. Go ahead and put 95. It was 95 degrees at 11. No, I'm sorry, 98 degrees at 11 o'clock this morning in Phoenix already. Let's see what Utah is reporting for Salt Lake. Salt Lake is reporting 75 right now. Okay, let's get that updated. Boise, what are you reporting? Let's see if it's cooled off up there. Boise is reporting 66 degrees. That's up 6 degrees from this afternoon. Idaho Falls. What are you reporting? There's Twin Falls. It's 62. Let's update that bad boy real quick. And Montana. Billings, Montana. What are you reporting? Let's go up here to Billings. Zoom out a little bit here. Billings looks like 57. Wow. 55, excuse me. 55 degrees in Billings, Montana. Wow. All right. Let's swing over to Bismarck, North Dakota. What's going to be the number there? Bismarck. Are you reporting? Minot's at 52. A little chilly up there. Bismarck is coming in at 55. Same exact temperature as our friends over to the west there. Fargo, what are you reporting? Fargo, where are you? I think Fargo is checking in at 55 as well. Update this guy here. 55 in Fargo. Rapid City, what are you reporting? Rapid City reporting 61. Interesting. No, that's Springs. Rapid City is actually reporting 53. That's down 22 degrees from this afternoon. It's really dropped. Whoa, not that far, guys. 53, not 22. Omaha, Nebraska. What are you reporting? Omaha. Omaha is checking in at 75. Nice. That's up 5 degrees from noon. Oops, jumped over too far. Kansas City. What are you reporting? Kansas City is checking in at 82 degrees still. Nice. Denver, Colorado. What are you reporting? 70 degrees right now in Denver, Colorado. It's only 1 degree off from what it was at noon. Albuquerque. What are you reporting? Albuquerque is checking in at 82 degrees. Let's update that. 82. Lubbock. What are you reporting? Lubbock is checking in at 80 degrees. That's up 7 degrees from noon. Dallas. What are you reporting? Dallas is checking in at 84 degrees. That's 11 degrees up from noon. Houston. What are you reporting? 82 degrees in Houston. That is up 12 degrees from noon. New Orleans, Louisiana. What are you reporting? 80 degrees in New Orleans. That is up 3 degrees from noon. Jackson, Mississippi. What are you reporting? Jackson is reporting 73 degrees. That is up 3 degrees from noon. Memphis. What are you reporting? Memphis. Memphis checking in at 73 degrees. That is up 5 degrees from noon. There we go. St. Louis. What are you reporting? St. Louis. St. Louis is checking in at 77 degrees. 5 degrees from noon. Iowa City. What are you checking in at? Jump up here to Iowa. 70 degrees in Iowa City. Up 3 degrees from noon. St. Paul, Minnesota. What are you reporting? 68 degrees in St. Paul. 2 degrees up from noon. Green Bay, Wisconsin. What are you reporting? 71 degrees in Green Bay. Up 9 from noon. Chicago, Illinois. What are you reporting? Chicago. Chicago is reporting 70. Up 2 degrees. Let's jump over to Detroit. What are you reporting? Detroit is reporting 68 degrees at 8:10 Central Time. Sorry, what was that? Double check. 66. 66. 66 in Detroit. Again, that's 8 p.m. Central Time. Okay, let's jump over to Columbus, Ohio. Those dirty, dirty. Okay, Columbus, Ohio, 68 degrees. Gonna say this, dirty Buckeye fans. Utica, what are you reporting? Utica is coming in at 64 degrees. Up 3 from noon. New York City, what are you reporting? 66 degrees. No, that can't be right. Is that right? No. Yeah, it's right. 66 degrees. 66 in New York City. All right. Washington, D.C., what are you reporting? 66 degrees as well. It's the same. It's the same it was at 11. Virginia Beach, our last check-in. What are you reporting? Virginia Beach coming in at 70, down 3 from noon. All right. Did I miss anybody? Charlotte, I missed you. What are you reporting? 73 degrees. Up 3 from noon. Charleston. I missed Charleston. Gosh, I missed a couple of them here. Charleston, South Carolina. What are you reporting? Charleston. What are you reporting? 77 degrees in Charleston. Ooh, no change. No change necessary. It's the same exact temperature it was at noon. Jacksonville, Florida. What are you reporting? 79. Just a couple more. Looks like Tampa Bay is our last one. Tampa Bay, what are you reporting? Tampa Bay, 84 degrees. And this is current as of 8:12 p.m. Central Standard Time. Excellent. Excellent. All right. We've got all of our temperatures up to date there. We have gone over our flash flood warnings, and we have gone over tomorrow's outlook. So we are up to date on all things weather related. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Let's see how many flash flood warnings we are at right now. Looks like we're up to 14. I'm going to go ahead and update our little keeper here. Let's change that to 14. And let's see what the added or extended. And did they add one? Oh, what the heck? Let's go over all of them. It looks like we have another. They did extend one. This one is out to 5 hours and 32 minutes for the following counties in Virginia: Henry County, Pennsylvania County, Franklin County, Virginia. 5 hours and 32 minutes left there. Appomattox, Virginia. I know I didn't pronounce that right. 4 hours and 47 minutes there. Monroe in Greenbrier, West Virginia, 3 hours and 32 minutes still there. Buckingham, Virginia, 3 hours and 17 minutes left there. The counties in Virginia: Campbell, Bedford, Pennsylvania. Actually, Pennsylvania. That one was extended, so this one isn't quite accurate right now. But Campbell County right now and Bedford, I believe, is at. Let me make sure that's right. It looks like it's at 3 hours and 2 minutes. Cumberland, Virginia, 2 hours and 47 minutes. Bertie, North Carolina, and Martin, North Carolina, 1 hour and 47 minutes. Fluvanna, Virginia, Cumberland, Virginia, Buckingham, Virginia, 1 hours and 32 minutes left. And the one at the top that Martin Bertie got extended to 1 hour and 47 minutes. And that pretty much covers everything. We are up to date and current. Let me just change this back to our cloud cover here and take off our temperatures, clear that out. I do want to take a look at the winds though. But they're in Virginia really quick. Okay. Forecast weather. Let's clear that out and get this rain in motion. There we go. Beautiful. Doesn't get any better than that, guys. That is awesome. But now if we could just get rid of these flash flood warnings, we would be in good shape. All right, we are good to go. I am going to start looking at a few more models for tomorrow. While I do that, I am going to throw Wendy on here. Let me get her to stop talking first. She is still talking. I've had her muted this whole time. Let me let me get her a break real quick. Let's get her stopped and restarted here. Old Wendy. She's a champ. All right, much better. Okay, Wendy, take it away. Tell us some about the most damaging hurricanes in the United States. Give us at least the top 9 or 10. Take it away, Wendy.
Hello everyone, this is Wendy again, to bring you more history about weather-related topics in the United States and around the world. If you enjoy this kind of content, please smack that like button and subscribe to Weather Zone 411 to stay up to date on all things weather-related. And have a great day. Now let's begin. Here is some interesting information on the biggest hurricanes to hit the United States. Hurricanes are among the most powerful and destructive natural phenomena on Earth. When they strike, these massive storms unleash a combination of heavy rains, powerful winds, and storm surges that can devastate communities, destroy infrastructure, and claim lives. The United States, with its extensive coastline, particularly along the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, has experienced some of the deadliest and most intense hurricanes in history. This essay explores the biggest hurricanes to hit the U.S., analyzing their impact.
Let me mute Wendy here. I'm checking out the Discord. Let me pull it up here. Says we don't have access. Wait a minute, I see. I can see it showing you online. Hold on. It says we need permission. Let's see. It shows Dustin online. I don't know. Let me see if it'll let me. Let me type a test message in chat. Let me try to get a test message. It seems to be working fine on my end. Everything looks normal. I haven't messed with anything. I don't know Discord, so you guys know I don't know Discord. I have to get other people to help me with that, but I don't mess with Discord too much. I know how to go in there and post messages and get into voice chat and stuff, but other than that, that's about as far as my expertise will push me there. I don't. I got a message from Dustin. Let me see. Messages. Where are you? Direct messages. Hmm. Hmm. Go into 411 Discord and go into this. Man, I don't even know how to go into the settings, buddy. Let me go 411. I'm using the Discord app. I'm not using the website, so I don't know if it looks different. Discord. It says boost server or server boost, invite people, server settings, create a channel, create category, create event, app directory, notification settings, privacy settings, edit server profile, hide muted channels, check privacy settings. Let's see her. Everything is turned on. It says direct messages, message requests, activity status, activity joining. Everything is checked on. Do, 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 do. Yeah, everything is on. Any other suggestions there to take a look at? Yeah, you can see it on my screen here. Hold on, I can here. Well, I'm not going to put all of it on screen, obviously, on YouTube, but that would be crazy. But let me. What was again? Privacy settings. There we go. I don't know if you can see that on cam, but right, right here it says on, and on. Everything is on. Messages, direct messages, activity status, activity joining, everything is in green. So everything is turned on my end. And I'm the, I don't know, whatever you call it, creator, I guess, of the Discord. So I have control over all that. Any other suggestions to rectify the situation? I don't know. But everything is checked on. Can you think of any other settings there I should check? And keep in mind too that this is the app. It's not the. I used to run it off the website for my old for like when I joined gaming once, but I decided to go ahead and download the Discord app this time, and that's what I've been using for the last month or so, and it's been working pretty good. Okay, right on, Dustin. And I did click on check for updates. It says that it's the current version. Let me check it again. Let's see. Create event. No. I got all the notifications, settings turned on. Everything's turned on. I can see. And there's only two types of members. There's me, and then there's everybody. There's no like other types of members. So there's no other permissions. While you check on that, I'm going to pull up another model here and see. Let me know if you figure anything out there, Dustin, and I'll check the settings. I'm just going to be checking some stuff here. I want to take a look at the tropical monitor or models that are out there right now for the Atlantic down in the Gulf area. And check this one way out here. There is one way out there. Way out there. Tropical development chance, 2 day is 60%, 7 day is 90%. Overall chance is high. Eastern Tropical Atlantic, AL91. Satellite wind data indicated that a broad area of low pressure has formed in the association with a tropical wave located a few hundred miles south of Cabo Verde Island. Showers and thunderstorms continue to gradually increase in association with the system, and environmental conditions appear conducive for further development. A tropical depression is very likely to form during the next few days while it moves slowly westward over the eastern tropical Atlantic. Formation chance over the next 48 hours is medium at 60%, and formation chance throughout 7 days is high at 90%. All right, let's check this other guy out down here. This one is has a tropical development chance over the next 2 days of 10% and 7 days of 40%. Overall chance is medium. Northwestern Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico. Disorganized showers and thunderstorms located over the southwestern Caribbean Sea are associated with a through of low pressure. Environmental conditions could support some gradual development of the system, and a tropical depression could form over the next week, several days while it moves generally northwestward over the northwestern Caribbean Sea and the southern Gulf of Mexico. Interests along the U.S. Gulf Coast should continue to monitor the progress of the system. Formation chance through 48 hours low at 10%. Formation chance through 7 days medium at 40%. And what was the name of that one again? They didn't have a number associated with this one, like 91, 92. Doesn't look like it. I'm going to go over here to the one just south of Mexico. Tropical development chance over the next 2 days, 71%. 7 days, also 71%. Overall chance is high. South of the Gulf of, wow, this name, Tehuantepec. Tehun, Tehuantepec. Um, did the best I could there. Sorry. 96E. Showers and thunderstorms associated with the area of low pressure near the Gulf of that name I tried to pronounce have continued to become better organized this afternoon. Although the system does not yet appear to have a well defined surface circulation, environmental conditions are expected to be conducive for additional development, and a tropical depression is likely to form as soon as tonight or tomorrow. The system is forecast to mender for the next couple of days for drifting northward towards the southern coast of Mexico. Again, 48-hour chance is 70%, and 7-day chance is 70%. And I'm going to look at this one over to the west of it. All right, tropical development for this one over the next 2 days is 30%, and 7 days is 70%. Overall chance is high. And this says offshore of southwestern Mexico, an area of low pressure is expected to gradually form off the coast of southwestern Mexico during the next day or so. Environmental conditions are expected to be conducive for development after that time, and a tropical depression is expected to form by the end of the week. The disturbance is forecast to meander near or just offshore the coast of Mexico for much of the week, and then begin to move slowly west northwestern, parallel to the coast of Mexico by this weekend. Regardless of development, this system is expected to contribute to heavy rainfall across portions of the southwestern coast of Mexico that were already adversely affected by the substantial rainfall last week. And interest there should monitor the progress of this disturbance. Again, formation chance through 48 hours low at 30%. Formation chance through 7 days is high at 70%. And that is everything out in the Atlantic and the Gulf and south of Mexico currently. You just messaged me something you found on Discord. Uh, okay, Dustin, thank you. I appreciate that, buddy. I'll check out. Did you send me the message on? I'm assuming you sent it on Discord or email. Let me check Discord. Okay, I see it on Discord. Um, within role member search server settings, default channels. Existing members not might be able to see default channels unless they show all channels. To make the server visible, you can. So you guys can't even. What? Going and selecting. That is so bizarre. Okay, man, I'm gonna watch. I don't know if it's gonna be tonight. Um, but by tomorrow, I'll check out some YouTube videos. But the only thing I don't understand is that the Discord has not updated. Like it hasn't like I didn't download any updates for it that would change any settings. And honestly, I don't think I could have changed any settings because I don't know how. I know how to go into the server settings. I see that. I see create a category, create an event, app directory, notification settings, which I everything is on, privacy settings, edit server profile, and hide muted channels. And that's unchecked where it says hide muted channels. So unless somebody else changed something that I don't think anybody else has access to, I don't think anybody could change anything except me. I do have a neighbor that does know a little bit about this stuff, though. Maybe I could have him come over this week and take a look at it for me. Or I'll just have him maybe join the server, join Discord if he can, and look at the settings for me on his end and see if he could tinker around with it and see if anything got changed. But that's really funny because I can obviously receive direct messages. I got yours just now. And in general post, everything's still in there. All the posts are in there. I wrote a test message and it worked just fine. Voice channels are working. I can use emotes. Yeah, I'm not sure, man. Not sure what the deal with that is. And I don't think anybody else could get into the settings. I don't think anybody else has permission to do that. I think it's only the person that actually created the channel. 2 days ago, you noticed it wasn't working. Wow. Well, thank you for bringing it to my attention. I appreciate that because, like I said, if you can see on the, I don't know how far my camera zooms in, but you can see Discord right here, and I'm able to type in messages and see statuses and check all my messages and everything like that. I have all your messages here. I'm still getting messages from all my gaming Discords that I'm a member. Yeah. Let me just double check. Yeah, all my buddies have been sending me messages over the last couple days, letting me know when certain things are going on. So all that seems to be working a-okay. Yeah, I'll have my buddy take a look at it. He works night shift, so maybe he can swing by during the day one day this week and take a look at it for me. Anywho, so that's where we are in the weather. There's really not a whole lot going on. The only thing we still have going on is the active flash flood warnings in Virginia and North Carolina. The one in West Virginia, is that still a thing? It looks like that has expired. The one that was over near Lewisburg, right along the West Virginia line, that has expired. So all we're left with pretty much is the flash flood warnings in eastern North Carolina and south central Virginia. Other than that, we are up to date. So I'm going to go back to looking at models for tomorrow. It doesn't really look like there's going to be much going on tomorrow either. That one storm is going to blow down from Canada across the lakes down into Michigan throughout the day. Um, I went as far as noon tomorrow, and it looks like it might be reaching Detroit by that time, but probably not. I don't even know if it had. I don't think it had made it to Flint by noon tomorrow. But just expect light to moderate rain over Michigan tomorrow as the storm crosses over the lakes into the United States. And expect more rain, unfortunately, in Virginia tomorrow. And I think that's pretty much going to be it. So anyhow, I hope everybody has had a wonderful day. Again, keep the folks in Virginia, North Carolina, and all those southern states that are affected by the floods in your prayers and thoughts. And I am out for right now. I'm going to go back to working on models and take it away, Wendy.
Low-income communities and people of color. This essay provides an in-depth analysis of Hurricane Katrina, examining the meteorological conditions that led to its formation, the impact on affected regions, the government response, the recovery process, and the long-term implications for disaster preparedness and social justice. Formation and meteorological conditions of Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina's origins can be traced to a tropical wave that emerged off the coast of Africa in mid-August 2005. It developed into a tropical depression on August 23, 2005, over the southeastern Bahamas, and by August 24, it had strengthened into a tropical storm, earning the name Katrina. Over the next several days, favorable atmospheric conditions, including warm sea surface temperatures, minimal wind shear, and a moist environment, allowed the storm to intensify. By August 25, Katrina reached hurricane status as it approached the southern tip of Florida. The storm made its first landfall in the Miami area as a Category 1 hurricane, causing minimal damage. However, after crossing Florida and entering the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, Katrina began to rapidly strengthen. By August 27, it had intensified to a Category 3 hurricane, and by August 28, Katrina reached its peak intensity as a Category 5 hurricane, with sustained winds of 175 miles per hour and a central pressure of 902 millibars, one of the lowest ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin. At its peak, Katrina was a massive storm, with hurricane-force winds extending outward up to 120 miles from its center. The storm was particularly dangerous due to its large size and slow forward speed, which allowed it to generate a substantial storm surge, a key factor in the widespread flooding that would follow. The combination of wind, rain, and surge made Hurricane Katrina a formidable and deadly force as it approached the Gulf Coast. Impact on the Gulf Coast and New Orleans. Hurricane Katrina made its second and most devastating landfall on August 29, 2005, along the Gulf Coast near Burris, Louisiana, as a Category 3 hurricane with winds of 125 miles per hour. Although the storm had weakened slightly from its peak intensity, it brought a massive storm surge that inundated coastal regions from Louisiana to Alabama, with the most severe impacts in New Orleans, Louisiana, and along the Mississippi coast. New Orleans, a city underwater. New Orleans, a city built below sea level and protected by a system of levees and pumps, was particularly vulnerable to Katrina's storm surge. The city's levee system, designed to protect it from flooding, was overwhelmed by the force of the storm, leading to catastrophic failures in multiple locations. Water from Lake Pontchartrain to the north and the Mississippi River to the south inundated the city, causing widespread flooding. The floodwaters covered approximately 80% of New Orleans, reaching depths of up to 20 feet in some areas. Neighborhoods such as the Lower Ninth Ward and New Orleans East were completely submerged, while other parts of the city saw more gradual flooding. The flooding displaced hundreds of thousands of residents, many of whom were unable to evacuate before the storm due to financial or logistical constraints. Mississippi and Alabama, ground zero for storm surge. While much of the media coverage focused on New Orleans, the Mississippi Gulf Coast bore the brunt of Katrina's storm surge. Towns like Gulfport, Biloxi, and Bay St. Louis were completely devastated by the 20 to 30-foot wall of water that swept ashore. The storm surge obliterated entire neighborhoods, reducing homes and businesses to rubble. Coastal casinos, hotels, and tourist attractions were destroyed, along with much of the region's infrastructure. Alabama's coastline, while less severely affected, also experienced significant storm surge damage, particularly in the town of Dauphin Island and surrounding areas. Casualties and humanitarian crisis. The human toll of Hurricane Katrina was staggering. Over 1,800 people lost their lives as a direct result of the storm and its aftermath. The vast majority of these deaths occurred in Louisiana, particularly in New Orleans, where the flooding led to drowning and other related causes. Many victims were elderly, disabled, or lacked the means to evacuate, highlighting the disproportionate impact on vulnerable populations. In the days following the storm, New Orleans descended into chaos. The city's emergency services were overwhelmed, and tens of thousands of residents were trapped in their homes or sought refuge in makeshift shelters, such as the Superdome and the Convention Center. Conditions in these shelters quickly deteriorated, with limited food, water, and medical supplies. Reports of violence, looting, and lawlessness further complicated rescue efforts, although many of these reports were later shown to be exaggerated or unsubstantiated. The humanitarian crisis in New Orleans became a national and international scandal, as images of stranded residents and flooded neighborhoods dominated news broadcasts. The slow and disorganized response by local, state, and federal authorities drew widespread criticism, with many accusing the government of failing to protect its most vulnerable citizens. Government response, a study in failure. The federal response to Hurricane Katrina is widely regarded as one of the greatest failures in the history of U.S. disaster management. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, which was tasked with coordinating the federal response, came under intense scrutiny for its slow and ineffective efforts to provide aid to the affected regions. Federal response, FEMA and the Bush administration. In the immediate aftermath of the storm, FEMA was criticized for its lack of preparedness and coordination. Despite repeated warnings about the potential impact of a major hurricane on New Orleans, FEMA had not adequately pre-positioned supplies or personnel in the region. The agency also struggled to coordinate with state and local authorities, leading to delays in the delivery of essential resources such as food, water, and medical aid. The public's frustration with FEMA reached a boiling point when the agency's director, Michael Brown, was slow to recognize the full scale of the disaster. Brown's now infamous statement, "Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job," made by President George W. Bush during a visit to the region, became a symbol of the administration's disconnected and inadequate response. Brown resigned from his position shortly after, but the damage to FEMA's reputation had already been done. President Bush himself faced heavy criticism for his handling of the crisis. His decision to fly over New Orleans rather than visit the city in person in the days immediately following the storm was widely perceived as indifferent and out of touch. The Bush administration's slow response and perceived lack of urgency exacerbated public outrage and further eroded confidence in the government's ability to manage disasters. State and local response, disorganized and overwhelmed. At the state and local levels, the response to Hurricane Katrina was also marked by confusion and disorganization. Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco and New Orleans Mayor Ray Nugent struggled to coordinate evacuation and relief efforts, often finding themselves at odds with one another and with federal authorities. One of the most significant failures at the local level was the lack of a comprehensive evacuation plan for the city of New Orleans. While mandatory evacuation orders were issued on August 28, many residents were unable to leave due to a lack of transportation, particularly those without access to private vehicles. Public transit options were limited, and the city's plan to use school buses to evacuate residents was not fully implemented. In the aftermath of the storm, Mayor Nugent and other local officials were criticized for their failure to maintain order and provide adequate shelter for the thousands of residents stranded in the city. The chaotic conditions in shelters like the Superdome and Convention Center highlighted the breakdown of local governance and emergency management. Social and economic impact. The social and economic impact of Hurricane Katrina was immense and long-lasting. The storm disproportionately affected low-income communities and communities of color, particularly in New Orleans, where racial and economic inequalities were starkly exposed. Displacement and housing crisis. Hurricane Katrina displaced more than 1 million people, making it one of the largest internal displacements in U.S. history. Many residents of New Orleans and the Gulf Coast lost their homes and were forced to relocate to other parts of the country, often permanently. The destruction of affordable housing in New Orleans exacerbated an already severe housing crisis, particularly for low-income residents and renters. In the years following the storm, efforts to rebuild affordable housing were slow and insufficient. Many former residents, particularly those from the lower Ninth Ward and other predominantly black neighborhoods, were unable to return to their homes due to a lack of affordable housing options. The slow pace of rebuilding, combined with rising property values and gentrification, led to the displacement of many longtime residents, fundamentally altering the demographics of New Orleans. Economic impact and recovery. The economic impact of Hurricane Katrina was devastating, particularly for the Gulf Coast's tourism, fishing, and oil industries. New Orleans, a city heavily reliant on tourism and cultural events, saw its economy collapse in the immediate aftermath of the storm. Many businesses were destroyed, and the city's tourism industry took years to recover. The Gulf Coast's fishing industry was also severely affected, with many fishing boats and processing facilities destroyed by the storm. The oil and gas industry, a major employer in the region, faced significant disruptions, particularly due to damage to offshore oil platforms and refineries. The economic recovery of the Gulf Coast was uneven, with some areas, particularly in Mississippi, recovering more quickly than others. Environmental impact. Hurricane Katrina had a profound impact on the environment of the Gulf Coast region. The storm's powerful winds and storm surge caused widespread damage to wetlands, barrier islands, and coastal ecosystems, which play a crucial role in protecting the region from future storms. Wetland loss and coastal erosion. The Mississippi River Delta and surrounding wetlands serve as a natural buffer against hurricanes, absorbing storm surge and reducing the impact of flooding. However, decades of human activity, including oil and gas exploration, levee construction, and land development, had already significantly degraded these wetlands before Katrina struck. The storm accelerated this process, causing substantial erosion and further weakening the region's natural defenses. The loss of wetlands and barrier islands increased the vulnerability of the Gulf Coast to future storms. In the years following Katrina, efforts to restore these critical ecosystems have been a priority for environmentalists and policymakers. However, the scale of the damage is vast, and restoring the region's natural defenses will be a long and costly process. Water contamination and public health concerns. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, water contamination became a major public health concern, particularly in New Orleans. The flooding caused by the storm overwhelmed the city's sewage and drainage systems, leading to the discharge of raw sewage, industrial chemicals, and hazardous materials into the floodwaters. The toxic mix of chemicals, debris, and waste posed serious health risks to residents and rescue workers, including exposure to bacteria, mold, and hazardous chemicals. Many homes and buildings that were flooded developed mold infestations, creating long-term health concerns for those who returned to the city in the months and years following the storm. The environmental damage caused by Hurricane Katrina highlighted the need for stronger environmental regulations and disaster preparedness measures to protect vulnerable communities from the long-term health and environmental consequences of natural disasters. Recovery and rebuilding, a tale of two cities. The recovery and rebuilding efforts following Hurricane Katrina were marked by stark contrasts. While some areas, particularly wealthier and wider neighborhoods, recovered relatively quickly, others, particularly low-income and predominantly Black neighborhoods, faced a slow and uneven recovery. Rebuilding New Orleans, successes and failures. In the years following Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans embarked on an ambitious rebuilding effort, with a focus on infrastructure improvements, economic revitalization, and cultural preservation. The city's tourism industry, a key driver of its economy, gradually rebounded as major cultural landmarks, such as the French Quarter and Bourbon Street, were restored. However, the recovery of New Orleans was far from uniform. While wealthier neighborhoods, such as the Garden District and Uptown, saw rapid rebuilding, poorer neighborhoods, such as the Lower Ninth Ward, languished. The Lower Ninth Ward, which had been one of the hardest hit areas during the storm, remained largely abandoned for years, with many residents unable to return due to a lack of affordable housing and inadequate government support. The slow pace of rebuilding in low-income neighborhoods highlighted deep racial and economic disparities in the city's recovery. Many residents of these neighborhoods felt abandoned by the government and excluded from the decision-making process, leading to widespread frustration and disillusionment. The role of nonprofits and community organizations. In the absence of adequate government support, many nonprofit organizations and community groups played a critical role in the recovery process. Organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, the Louisiana Disaster Recovery Foundation, and local grassroots groups provided much-needed resources and support to displaced residents, helping to rebuild homes, provide legal assistance, and advocate for the rights of marginalized communities. These organizations also played a key role in preserving the cultural heritage of New Orleans, particularly its vibrant music and arts scenes. Efforts to support local musicians, artists, and cultural institutions helped ensure that the city's unique culture was not lost in the wake of the storm. Lessons learned: building a more resilient city. In the years following Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans made significant strides in improving its resilience to future disasters. The city's levee system, which had failed so catastrophically during the storm, was rebuilt and strengthened with the help of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. New flood protection measures, including floodgates and pumping stations, were installed to reduce the risk of future flooding. Additionally, the city made efforts to improve its disaster preparedness and response capabilities, including the development of more comprehensive evacuation plans and improved coordination between local, state, and federal agencies. However, despite these improvements, New Orleans remains vulnerable to future hurricanes and flooding, particularly as climate change increases the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. The city's recovery from Hurricane Katrina serves as a reminder of the ongoing challenges of disaster preparedness and the need for continued investment in resilience and sustainability. The legacy of Hurricane Katrina, social justice and inequality. One of the most enduring legacies of Hurricane Katrina is its impact on the national conversation about social justice and inequality. The storm exposed deep-rooted racial and economic disparities in the United States, particularly in the South, and highlighted the ways in which marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by natural disasters, poverty, and vulnerability. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, it became clear that poverty played a significant role in determining who was most affected by the storm. Low-income residents were less likely to have the resources to evacuate before the storm, and they were more likely to live in neighborhoods that were vulnerable to flooding. The role of government in addressing inequality. Hurricane Katrina sparked a national debate about the role of government in addressing social inequality and protecting vulnerable communities. The disaster highlighted the need for more robust social safety nets, particularly in the areas of housing, healthcare, and disaster preparedness. In the years following the storm, there have been calls for greater investment in affordable housing, stronger environmental protections, and more equitable disaster recovery policies. Conclusion. Hurricane Katrina was a devastating natural disaster that left a profound mark on the United States. Its impact was felt not only in the immediate destruction it caused but also in the social, economic, and political repercussions that followed. The storm exposed deep-seated inequalities in American society, challenged the government's ability to respond to large-scale disasters, and forced the nation to confront the reality of climate change and environmental vulnerability. The recovery from Hurricane Katrina has been a long and difficult process, with successes and failures along the way. While the city of New Orleans has made significant strides in rebuilding and improving its resilience, many of the underlying issues of social and economic inequality that were exposed by the storm remain unresolved. The legacy of Hurricane Katrina serves as a reminder of the importance of preparedness and resilience in the face of natural disasters. As the world continues to grapple with the increasing threat of climate change, the lessons learned from Katrina will be critical in shaping future disaster response and recovery efforts. Next up. Number 3. Hurricane Andrew, 1992. Striking southern Florida in August 1992, Hurricane Andrew was a Category 5 storm, the highest on the Saffir-Simpson scale, with sustained winds reaching 165 miles per hour. The hurricane devastated the areas of Homestead, Florida City, and parts of Miami. Casualties and damage. Andrew caused 65 deaths and left a trail of destruction in its wake, with damages totaling approximately $27.3 billion, about $50 billion today. In Dade County, it destroyed over 63,000 homes, left 175,000 people homeless, and resulted in massive infrastructure damage. The storm also severely impacted Louisiana and the Bahamas. Hurricane Andrew's destruction revealed deficiencies in building codes, prompting significant reforms in Florida. New construction standards were implemented, ensuring that homes and buildings in hurricane-prone areas were more resistant to future storms. Andrew also reshaped the insurance industry, as many companies faced bankruptcy from the sheer volume of claims. Hurricane Andrew, a comprehensive analysis of one of the most destructive storms in U.S. history. Now the rest of the story. First, an introduction. Hurricane Andrew, which struck the United States in August 1992, is remembered as one of the most catastrophic natural disasters in American history. Classified as a Category 5 hurricane, Andrew brought unprecedented destruction, particularly to South Florida and parts of Louisiana, leaving a lasting legacy that reshaped disaster preparedness and response in the United States. With estimated damages of $27.3 billion, 1992 USD, making it the most expensive hurricane at the time, Andrew devastated communities, displaced hundreds of thousands of people, and highlighted the vulnerabilities in infrastructure, emergency management, and insurance systems. This essay provides a detailed analysis of Hurricane Andrew, covering its formation and meteorological characteristics, the impact on affected areas, government responses, recovery efforts, and its long-term implications for disaster preparedness, urban development, and insurance policies. Formation and meteorological development of Hurricane Andrew. Hurricane Andrew originated from a tropical wave that moved off the coast of Africa on August 14, 1992. For several days, the wave showed signs of developing into a tropical depression but was hindered by wind shear. By August 16, a low-pressure system began to form, but it wasn't until August 17 that the system was classified as a tropical depression over the central Atlantic, approximately 1,600 miles east of the Lesser Antilles. As the depression moved westward, conditions became more favorable for development. On August 18, it intensified into Tropical Storm Andrew. However, Andrew remained relatively weak and poorly organized due to continued wind shear. By August 22, the wind shear began to diminish, and the storm rapidly strengthened into a hurricane, thanks to the warm sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic. The system followed a west-northwest trajectory, gradually intensifying as it neared the Bahamas. On August 23, Andrew reached Category 4 strength, and by the early hours of August 24, it intensified into a Category 5 hurricane, the highest classification on the Saffir-Simpson scale, with sustained winds of 165 miles per hour. At this point, Andrew was a compact but extraordinarily powerful hurricane, characterized by a well-defined eye and tightly organized bands of strong winds and thunderstorms. Andrew made its first landfall in the Bahamas as a Category 5 hurricane on August 23, causing significant damage to islands like Weatehr and the Berry Islands. After crossing the Bahamas, the storm maintained its intensity as it approached South Florida, where it made its most devastating landfall. The impact of Hurricane Andrew on South Florida. On the morning of August 24, 1992, Hurricane Andrew made landfall in Homestead, Florida, as a Category 5 hurricane with sustained winds of 165 miles per hour and gusts exceeding 175 miles per hour. The storm surge, combined with the ferocious winds, created an unprecedented level of destruction in Miami-Dade County, particularly in the communities of Homestead, Florida City, and Kendall. The compactness of Andrew's eye wall concentrated its destructive power over a relatively small area, intensifying the damage within its immediate path. Widespread destruction of homes and infrastructure. Hurricane Andrew devastated South Florida's built environment. Entire neighborhoods were leveled, with homes reduced to their foundations. An estimated 63,000 homes were destroyed, and over 100,000 more were damaged, leaving approximately 175,000 people homeless. The storm's winds were so powerful that they stripped roofs from houses, shattered windows, and launched debris at lethal speeds. Some of the worst damage occurred in mobile home parks, where entire communities were wiped out. Beyond residential destruction, critical infrastructure was severely impacted. Schools, hospitals, and government buildings suffered extensive damage, while electrical grids, water treatment plants, and communication systems were severely disrupted. In total, more than 1.4 million people lost power, many for weeks after the storm. The economic disruption was enormous, with local businesses destroyed or forced to close due to damage and loss of inventory. Devastation to agriculture and the environment. The agricultural sector in South Florida was another major casualty of Hurricane Andrew. The region's important crops, including citrus, avocado, and sugarcane, were decimated by the storm. In Dade County, the storm caused an estimated $1 billion in agricultural losses, wiping out much of the area's fruit trees and greenhouses. The loss of crops and farmland not only disrupted local farmers' livelihoods but also had a ripple effect on the national agricultural market. The environmental impact of Hurricane Andrew was equally severe. South Florida's natural ecosystems, particularly in the Everglades and Biscayne National Park, suffered significant damage. The storm's winds uprooted large numbers of trees and altered the landscape, while the powerful storm surge caused saltwater intrusion, which further stressed the delicate balance of freshwater ecosystems. Wildlife populations were displaced or killed, particularly vulnerable species like wading birds and the Florida panther, whose habitat was severely disrupted. Hurricane Andrew's impact on Louisiana and the Gulf Coast. After crossing South Florida, Hurricane Andrew weakened to a Category 3 hurricane as it moved westward into the Gulf of Mexico. The storm regained some strength before making a second landfall in south-central Louisiana near Morgan City on August 26, with winds of approximately 115 miles per hour. While the storm had weakened significantly, it still caused considerable damage along the Gulf Coast, particularly in Louisiana. Louisiana's agricultural and economic losses. In Louisiana, the damage was less severe than in Florida, but still significant. The storm caused widespread flooding, wind damage, and storm surge along the coast. Agricultural losses were particularly notable, as the state's sugarcane and soybean crops were heavily impacted. The flooding also caused significant damage to homes and businesses in low-lying areas, leading to economic losses estimated at over $1 billion in the state. Oil and gas industry disruption. Another major consequence of Hurricane Andrew's impact on the Gulf Coast was the disruption of the region's oil and gas industry. Offshore drilling platforms and refineries were damaged or destroyed, leading to a temporary reduction in the nation's oil production. This disruption underscored the vulnerability of the United States energy infrastructure to hurricanes and other natural disasters, prompting calls for more robust safety measures and infrastructure improvements in the aftermath of the storm. Casualties and humanitarian crisis. Despite the immense physical destruction caused by Hurricane Andrew, the loss of life was relatively low compared to other catastrophic storms. A total of 65 people died as a result of the hurricane, 26 directly from the storm and 39 indirectly due to post-storm accidents, medical conditions, or delayed medical treatment. The relatively low death toll is attributed to the timely evacuation orders issued before the storm made landfall, as well as the storm's relatively fast passage over South Florida, which limited prolonged exposure to dangerous conditions. However, the humanitarian crisis that followed the storm was significant. In South Florida, tens of thousands of people were left homeless and without access to basic necessities such as food, water, and medical care. Emergency shelters were quickly overwhelmed, and the scale of the destruction made it difficult for relief agencies to reach all affected areas. In the immediate aftermath of the storm, there were reports of looting, price gouging, and other forms of social unrest as desperate residents sought to secure resources. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, along with state and local governments, mobilized resources to provide emergency aid, but the response was criticized for being slow and insufficient in the face of the overwhelming need. Many residents were left to rely on their own resources or on charitable organizations like the Red Cross for basic supplies and assistance. The government response to Hurricane Andrew. The government response to Hurricane Andrew, particularly at the federal level, was widely criticized for its shortcomings. While some state and local agencies responded effectively, the overall disaster response revealed significant gaps in preparedness, coordination, and resource allocation. Federal response and criticism of FEMA. FEMA, the federal agency responsible for coordinating disaster response and recovery efforts, faced intense scrutiny in the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew. The agency was widely criticized for its slow response, lack of coordination with state and local governments, and failure to adequately pre-position resources in advance of the storm. Many affected residents, particularly in South Florida, were left without critical supplies such as food, water, and medical aid for days after the storm, leading to widespread frustration and anger. FEMA's response was hampered by several factors, including bureaucratic inefficiencies, a lack of funding, and inadequate planning for a disaster of Andrew's magnitude. At the time, FEMA was considered a relatively low-priority agency within the federal government, with limited resources and personnel dedicated to disaster preparedness and response. The agency's shortcomings in responding to Hurricane Andrew ultimately led to significant reforms in the years that followed, including a greater emphasis on disaster preparedness and mitigation. State and local response, mixed results. At the state and local levels, the response to Hurricane Andrew was mixed. Florida's Governor Lawton Chiles and local officials in Miami-Dade County were praised for their efforts to coordinate evacuations and provide emergency shelter for residents before the storm. However, the scale of the disaster overwhelmed local resources, and the response in the days following the storm was uneven. One of the major challenges faced by state and local authorities was the breakdown of communication systems in the aftermath of the storm. Power outages and damaged infrastructure made it difficult for emergency responders to communicate with each other and with affected residents. This lack of coordination hindered rescue and relief efforts, particularly in hard-hit areas like Homestead, where many residents were left without assistance for several days. Despite these challenges, local communities in South Florida showed remarkable resilience and solidarity in the face of the disaster. Volunteers from across the state and country traveled to the affected areas to assist with relief efforts, and many residents banded together to help their neighbors recover from the storm. The recovery process, rebuilding after Hurricane Andrew. The recovery process after Hurricane Andrew was long and difficult, particularly in South Florida, where the scale of the destruction was unprecedented. The rebuilding process took years, and many residents faced significant financial and emotional challenges as they sought to rebuild their homes and lives. Insurance and financial challenges. One of the most significant challenges faced by residents and businesses in the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew was the issue of insurance. Many homeowners discovered that their insurance policies did not cover the full extent of the damage caused by the storm, leaving them with significant out-of-pocket expenses. Additionally, the massive number of insurance claims filed in the wake of the storm strained the financial resources of insurance companies, leading to the collapse of several major insurers. The collapse of the insurance market in Florida prompted state officials to take action to stabilize the industry and ensure that homeowners had access to affordable coverage. The state created a Florida Hurricane Catastrophe Fund to provide financial support to insurance companies in the event of future hurricanes, and the state-run Citizens Property Insurance Corporation was established to serve as a last resort insurer for homeowners who were unable to obtain coverage through the private market. Rebuilding communities and infrastructure. Rebuilding the physical infrastructure of South Florida was a massive undertaking that required years of effort and billions of dollars in investment. Homes, schools, hospitals, and businesses had to be rebuilt or repaired, and critical infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and power lines had to be restored. The rebuilding process also provided an opportunity to implement stricter building codes and regulations to ensure that structures were more resilient to future hurricanes. In the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew, Florida adopted some of the strictest building codes in the country, requiring that new homes and buildings be constructed to withstand higher wind speeds and other hurricane-related hazards. These reforms have been credited with reducing the damage caused by subsequent hurricanes in the state. Psychological and social impact. In addition to the physical and financial challenges of recovery, many residents of South Florida experienced significant psychological and emotional trauma as a result of Hurricane Andrew. The loss of homes, businesses, and loved ones, combined with the stress of rebuilding and recovering from the disaster, took a heavy toll on the mental health of many individuals and communities. In the years following the storm, mental health services were made available to help residents cope with the emotional aftermath of the disaster. Community support groups, counseling services, and outreach programs were established to provide assistance to those in need, and many residents found solace in their faith and in the resilience of their communities. Long-term implications and lessons learned from Hurricane Andrew. Hurricane Andrew had a profound and lasting impact on the United States, shaping the way the country prepares for, responds to, and recovers from natural disasters. The storm exposed significant weaknesses in the nation's disaster preparedness and response systems and prompted a series of reforms aimed at improving resilience and reducing vulnerability to future hurricanes. reforming FEMA and federal disaster response. One of the most significant long-term outcomes of Hurricane Andrew was the reform of FEMA and the federal disaster response system. In the aftermath of the storm, FEMA was overhauled to improve its ability to respond to large-scale disasters. The agency was given greater resources and authority, and its role in disaster preparedness, mitigation, and recovery was expanded. FEMA's reform was further solidified in the wake of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, when the agency's response to another major disaster was again called into question. The lessons learned from Hurricane Andrew helped shape the federal government's approach to disaster management in the 21st century, with a greater emphasis on preparedness, coordination, and mitigation, strengthening building codes and infrastructure resilience. Hurricane Andrew also prompted significant changes in building codes and construction practices, particularly in hurricane-prone regions like Florida. The storm demonstrated a vulnerability of poorly constructed homes and buildings to high winds and storm surge, leading to the adoption of stricter building standards designed to improve the resilience of structures to future hurricanes. The introduction of more stringent building codes in Florida has been credited with reducing the damage caused by subsequent hurricanes, including Hurricane Irma in 2017.
Hey, it looks like we just got issued a tornado warning for Beaufort and Hyde, North Carolina. Let me take a look at this really quick here. Let's take a quick look at the wind velocities over here and see what's happening. See a little bit of rotation up there to the northwest corner of where this warning is at. Let's see. Just a little bit right there. Majority of this is over water. Um, the Pamlico River and the little inlet over there near the Hugo River. Keep eye on this as it continues to move to the east. Again, this warning area is just to the south of Bellhaven, near the Pugo River and the Pamlico River. And that's currently where those inbound winds are right now, right over the Hunga River. And it looks like there's a little bit of inbound wind just to the northwest of this warning area over the Pugo River. There's no indication of rotation or a tornado on the ground. There is a little bit of rotation. Nothing showing up on the coefficient here. And reflectivity differential looks good. Keep an eye on the winds here. Continues to blow east. And this again is for Beaufort and Hyde County, North Carolina. It was issued just about 2 minutes ago, and it's in effect for the next 27 minutes, it looks like. Just a note, looks like we also have a little bit of counter winds over there between Bath and Washington in North Carolina. Keep an eye on those too. Doesn't appear to be any lightning or involved in the storm right now. It's just light to moderate rain. Wind speeds are moderate, 17 to 25 miles per hour. Okay. We'll keep an eye on this right now. It doesn't look like there's much of anything going on here. Like I said, there's a little bit of rotation here, but it's over the Pugo River or Pungo River and the Pamlico River right now. So we'll keep an eye on it. If anything changes, I will break in and let you know.
Strengthened into a Category 3 major hurricane. By September 18th, Maria reached Category 5 status as it approached the Caribbean, with sustained winds of 175 miles per hour. The hurricane had a well-defined eye and exhibited the classic structure of a powerful and dangerous storm. Maria made its first landfall on the island of Dominica on September 18th as a Category 5 hurricane, causing catastrophic damage. The storm then passed near St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands before making its most devastating landfall in Puerto Rico on September 20th. By this time, the storm had slightly weakened to a Category 4 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 155 miles per hour. Despite the slight weakening, Maria's size and power, combined with its slow movement, ensured that it would wreak immense destruction on Puerto Rico. Impact on Puerto Rico: widespread destruction and humanitarian crisis. When Hurricane Maria made landfall in Puerto Rico, it unleashed its full fury on the island, which was already grappling with financial struggles and a fragile infrastructure. Maria's destructive winds and torrential rains caused widespread devastation across the island, from the capital, San Juan, to the more remote rural areas. In addition to the direct impact of the storm, Puerto Rico's prolonged recovery process exposed deeper issues related to political governance, economic inequality, and federal aid distribution. Infrastructure collapse. One of the most immediate and visible consequences of Hurricane Maria was the near-total collapse of Puerto Rico's infrastructure. The island's already fragile power grid was completely destroyed, plunging the entire population of 3.4 million into darkness. It took months, nearly a year in some areas, before power was fully restored across the island. The storm knocked down thousands of power lines, poles, and transmission towers, rendering most of the island's electrical system inoperable. The damage was so severe that experts warned it would take years and billions of dollars to modernize Puerto Rico's power grid. Water systems were also severely damaged. Drinking water and sanitation services were disrupted for millions of residents, raising concerns about waterborne diseases and public health crises. In the immediate aftermath, access to clean water was limited, forcing many to rely on bottled water distributed by relief agencies. Maria also destroyed homes, buildings, schools, and hospitals. An estimated 80% of homes on the island were damaged or destroyed, with the hardest-hit areas losing nearly all structures. Many buildings were not designed to withstand Category 4 or 5 hurricane winds, which contributed to the widespread destruction. Roads and bridges were washed out, cutting off entire communities from emergency aid and delaying recovery efforts for weeks. Hospitals, already strained by financial issues, struggled to remain operational without power and supplies. Agriculture and economic losses. Puerto Rico's agriculture sector was decimated by Hurricane Maria. The storm's winds flattened fields and uprooted crops, causing an estimated $780 million in agricultural losses. Plantations of coffee, bananas, and plantains, some of the island's primary crops, were wiped out. The loss of livestock and farmland further exacerbated the economic damage, leaving many farmers without livelihoods and contributing to food shortages. In addition to agriculture, the broader economy of Puerto Rico was severely impacted. Tourism, one of the island's major industries, suffered as hotels and resorts were damaged or closed, and tourists canceled trips in the aftermath of the storm. Many businesses across the island were forced to close, either due to physical damage or the prolonged loss of power and communication systems. The economic losses were compounded by Puerto Rico's ongoing debt crisis, which had left the island's government with limited resources to fund recovery efforts. Human toll and health crisis. While the official death toll of Hurricane Maria was initially set at 64, subsequent studies and investigations revealed that the true number of deaths was much higher. The government of Puerto Rico later revised the death toll to nearly 3,000, including both direct and indirect fatalities. Many of the deaths occurred in the weeks and months following the storm due to a lack of access to medical care, power outages in hospitals, and the failure of critical health services. The health crisis that followed Hurricane Maria was compounded by the destruction of hospitals and clinics, as well as the collapse of the island's transportation network, which made it difficult for residents to access medical care. Many people, particularly those in rural areas, were left without necessary medications, treatments, and access to healthcare professionals. Elderly and disabled residents were particularly vulnerable, with many dying from conditions that could have been prevented with timely medical intervention. The mental health toll of Hurricane Maria was also significant. The trauma of losing homes, jobs, and loved ones, combined with the stress of living without basic services like power and water, contributed to widespread psychological distress. Mental health services were overwhelmed, and many residents experienced symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and depression. Displacement and migration. Hurricane Maria triggered a mass exodus from Puerto Rico, as tens of thousands of residents fled the island to seek refuge on the U.S. mainland. By some estimates, more than 130,000 Puerto Ricans relocated to the continental United States in the year following the storm, particularly to Florida, New York, and Texas. Many of these migrants faced challenges finding housing, employment, and social services in their new communities, further compounding the humanitarian crisis. The migration also had long-term demographic and economic implications for Puerto Rico. The island's population, already in decline due to years of economic recession, dropped sharply after the hurricane. The loss of residents, particularly young and working-age individuals, reduced the island's workforce and tax base, making recovery even more difficult. Government response, failures and controversies. The response to Hurricane Maria by both the Puerto Rican government and the federal government of the United States was widely criticized for being slow, disorganized, and insufficient. While efforts were made to provide relief and aid to the island, the scale of the disaster, combined with logistical challenges and political tensions, led to significant delays and shortcomings in the response. Federal response and FEMA's role. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, was the primary federal agency responsible for coordinating disaster relief efforts in Puerto Rico. However, the agency was unprepared for the scale of the disaster and struggled to effectively deliver aid to the island. In the weeks following the storm, FEMA faced widespread criticism for its slow response and logistical failures. Food, water, and medical supplies were delayed in reaching affected areas, particularly in remote regions, where some residents waited weeks for aid. Part of the problem stemmed from the logistical challenges of delivering aid to an island. Unlike hurricanes that strike the U.S. mainland, where supplies and resources can be transported by road, Puerto Rico's location required air and sea transport, which was hampered by damaged airports, ports, and roads. Additionally, FEMA was already stretched thin by the need to respond to other disasters, including Hurricane Harvey in Texas and Hurricane Irma in Florida, which had struck just weeks before Maria. The federal government's response to Hurricane Maria was also criticized for political reasons. President Donald Trump's administration was accused of providing less aid and attention to Puerto Rico than to other U.S. states affected by hurricanes in the same season. The president's contentious relationship with Puerto Rican officials, particularly Governor Ricardo Rosselló, and his public comments about the island's debt crisis further inflamed tensions. Images of Trump tossing paper towels to hurricane survivors during a visit to Puerto Rico became a symbol of the perceived disconnect between the federal government and the reality on the ground. Puerto Rican government response. The Puerto Rican government's response to Hurricane Maria was also criticized, particularly for its lack of preparedness and its handling of the aftermath. Prior to the storm, Puerto Rico had not fully implemented an effective disaster preparedness plan, and the island's infrastructure was ill-equipped to withstand a major hurricane. The power grid, in particular, had been neglected for years due to financial constraints, making it vulnerable to collapse. In the aftermath of the storm, Puerto Rican officials struggled to coordinate relief efforts and restore basic services. The government's communication with FEMA and other federal agencies was hampered by bureaucratic inefficiencies and a lack of clear leadership. Governor Rosselló faced backlash from both residents and political opponents for his handling of the crisis, with critics accusing him of being too slow to request federal assistance and too passive in holding the U.S. government accountable for its response. Despite these challenges, local governments and community organizations played a critical role in providing relief to residents. In many cases, mayors and community leaders stepped in to distribute supplies, organize shelters, and coordinate recovery efforts when state and federal assistance was slow to arrive. The recovery process, slow and uneven progress. The recovery from Hurricane Maria has been a long and difficult process for Puerto Rico. While some progress has been made in rebuilding infrastructure and restoring services, many residents have faced ongoing challenges related to housing, employment, healthcare, and mental health. The island's recovery has been hindered by financial constraints, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and political obstacles. Rebuilding the power grid. One of the most pressing challenges in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria was the need to rebuild Puerto Rico's power grid, which had been completely destroyed by the storm. The island's electrical system was already in a state of disrepair before Maria, due to years of neglect, underfunding, and mismanagement by the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, PREPA. After the storm, it became clear that the grid would need to be rebuilt almost entirely from scratch. The process of restoring power to Puerto Rico was slow and fraught with challenges. In the weeks following the storm, large portions of the island remained without electricity, hampering recovery efforts and leaving many residents in difficult living conditions. The federal government, through FEMA, allocated billions of dollars to rebuild the grid, but progress was slow due to logistical challenges, labor shortages, and disagreements over how to modernize the system. PREPA faced significant criticism for its handling of the recovery process. The utility was accused of mismanaging contracts, including a controversial $300 million contract awarded to the small Montana-based company Whitefish Energy to help restore power. The contract, which was later canceled amid public outcry, raised concerns about corruption and the misuse of federal funds. Efforts to modernize Puerto Rico's power grid have focused on making it more resilient to future storms, with an emphasis on renewable energy sources such as solar power. However, progress has been slow, and as of several years after the storm, the island's power system remains vulnerable to future hurricanes and other natural disasters. Housing and infrastructure rebuilding. Rebuilding homes and infrastructure in Puerto Rico has been another major challenge in the recovery process. In the immediate aftermath of the storm, thousands of residents were displaced, living in shelters, makeshift homes, or with relatives. Many homes that were damaged or destroyed by the storm were not covered by insurance, leaving residents with few options for rebuilding. The federal government allocated billions of dollars in aid through programs such as the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, CDBGDR, to help rebuild homes and infrastructure. However, the distribution of these funds has been slow and uneven, with many residents waiting months or even years for assistance. In addition to rebuilding homes, Puerto Rico has faced the challenge of repairing and modernizing its infrastructure, including roads, bridges, hospitals, and schools. The island's transportation network was severely damaged by the storm, and the lack of reliable infrastructure has made it difficult to deliver aid and services to remote areas. The recovery process has been complicated by the island's financial crisis, which has limited the government's ability to invest in infrastructure improvements. Social and economic recovery. Hurricane Maria exacerbated many of the social and economic challenges that Puerto Rico was already facing before the storm. The island's economy, which had been in recession for more than a decade, was further weakened by the destruction of businesses, the loss of tourism revenue, and the mass migration of residents to the U.S. mainland. Unemployment rates spiked in the aftermath of the storm, as many businesses were forced to close or cut back operations due to damage and the loss of power. The agriculture sector, which had been a significant source of employment in rural areas, was devastated by the storm, leaving many farmers without livelihoods. The federal government allocated aid for economic recovery, including loans and grants for small businesses, but the distribution of these funds has been slow and insufficient to fully address the economic damage caused by the storm. Many residents and businesses have struggled to access federal aid due to bureaucratic hurdles and delays in the application process. Long-term implications of Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria has left a lasting legacy on Puerto Rico and the broader Caribbean region, shaping the way governments, organizations, and communities approach disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. The storm exposed deep vulnerabilities in Puerto Rico's infrastructure, governance, and economy, and it prompted important conversations about the island's political relationship with the United States. Disaster preparedness and climate resilience. One of the most important lessons learned from Hurricane Maria is the need for improved disaster preparedness and resilience, particularly in the context of climate change. As the frequency and intensity of hurricanes increase due to rising global temperatures, it is essential for governments and communities to invest in infrastructure that can withstand extreme weather events. Puerto Rico has taken steps to improve its resilience to future hurricanes, including modernizing its power grid, building more resilient homes, and implementing flood control measures. However, there is still much work to be done, particularly in addressing the island's financial and governance challenges, which have hindered long-term recovery efforts. Political and economic implications. Hurricane Maria also highlighted the unique political status of Puerto Rico as a U.S. territory and raised questions about the federal government's responsibility to provide aid and support to the island. The slow and inadequate response to the storm prompted widespread criticism and renewed debates about Puerto Rico's relationship with the United States. Many Puerto Ricans and political leaders have called for changes to the island's political status, with some advocating for statehood and others for greater autonomy or independence. The storm also brought attention to the island's ongoing debt crisis and the need for comprehensive economic reforms to address the root causes of Puerto Rico's financial challenges. Conclusion. Hurricane Maria was one of the most devastating natural disasters in recent history, leaving a lasting impact on Puerto Rico and the broader Caribbean region. The storm exposed significant vulnerabilities in infrastructure, governance, and disaster preparedness, and it prompted important conversations about social justice, climate resilience, and political governance. While progress has been made in the years since the storm, Puerto Rico's recovery remains incomplete, and many residents continue to face challenges related to housing, healthcare, employment, and infrastructure. The lessons learned from Hurricane Maria will be critical in shaping future disaster response and recovery efforts, not only in Puerto Rico but around the world. As communities grapple with the increasing threats posed by climate change and extreme weather events. Number 5. The Labor Day Hurricane, 1935. The Labor Day hurricane of 1935 remains the strongest hurricane to ever make landfall in the United States. Striking the Florida Keys as a Category 5 storm, it brought sustained winds of 185 miles per hour, making it one of only a few storms to achieve this intensity. Casualties and damage. The hurricane resulted in around 400 deaths, many of them World War I veterans who were working on a construction project in the Keys. The storm surge of 18 to 20 feet swept across the islands, leaving little in its wake. Although it caused significant local damage, its isolated impact zone meant the total financial cost, in today's terms, was relatively modest compared to later storms. The disaster led to significant federal interventions to improve evacuation and communication systems during future hurricanes. It also demonstrated the critical need for understanding the strength of approaching hurricanes, spurring advancements in hurricane forecasting. Number 6. Hurricane Sandy, 2012. Though technically downgraded to a post-tropical cyclone before making landfall in New Jersey, Hurricane Sandy is often remembered as a hurricane due to its size and the damage it caused. Striking in late October 2012, Sandy affected much of the eastern seaboard, from the Carolinas to Maine, but its most significant impacts were felt in New York and New Jersey. Casualties and damage. The storm caused at least 233 deaths across 8 countries, with 159 of them in the U.S. Sandy inflicted approximately $65 billion in damage, making it one of the costliest hurricanes in U.S. history. In New York City, subways and tunnels were flooded, and millions of people were left without power. Impact. The devastation led to new strategies for protecting cities from storm surges and other climate-related threats. In particular, Sandy highlighted the vulnerability of coastal megacities to rising sea levels and increasingly frequent storms driven by climate change. The storm prompted significant investments in seawalls, improved drainage systems, and resilient power grids. Next up. Number 7. Hurricane Harvey, 2017. One of the most devastating hurricanes in recent U.S. history, Hurricane Harvey made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane in Texas in August 2017. The storm's unusual behavior, stalling over Houston and dumping unprecedented amounts of rain, made it especially destructive. Casualties and damage. Harvey caused at least 107 deaths and inflicted $125 billion in damage, tying it with Katrina as the costliest tropical cyclone in U.S. history. Harvey dropped more than 60 inches of rain in some areas, causing catastrophic flooding in Houston and surrounding communities. Impact. The unprecedented rainfall and resulting flooding exposed the dangers posed by modern urban development in flood-prone areas. The response to Harvey was more coordinated than previous disasters, but it still emphasized the need for improved urban planning, better flood control systems, and more resilient infrastructure. Now the rest of the story. Hurricane Harvey, a comprehensive analysis of the storm's impact, response, and legacy. Introduction. Hurricane Harvey, which made landfall on August 25, 2017, near Rockport, Texas, became one of the most devastating natural disasters in U.S. history. Categorized as a Category 4 hurricane with sustained winds of 130 miles per hour, Harvey unleashed catastrophic flooding, especially in the Houston metropolitan area, and caused widespread destruction across southeast Texas. The storm stalled over the region for days, dumping record amounts of rainfall, leading to severe flooding that displaced thousands of people, caused at least 107 deaths, and inflicted an estimated $125 billion in damages. Harvey became the second most expensive hurricane on record after Hurricane Katrina, illustrating the destructive potential of intense storms, particularly in heavily populated areas. In this comprehensive analysis, we will explore the meteorological development of Hurricane Harvey, its impact on Texas and Louisiana, the government and societal responses to the disaster, and the long-term implications of the storm for disaster preparedness, urban planning, and climate resilience. We will also examine the broader context of climate change, as Harvey's unprecedented rainfall raised questions about the future of severe weather events in a warming world. Meteorological development and characteristics of Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey began as a tropical wave off the coast of Africa in early August 2017. Initially, The system struggled to develop as it moved across the Atlantic Ocean and into the Caribbean, where it passed through the Windward Islands as a tropical storm on August 17. However, Harvey quickly weakened into a tropical depression as it moved across the Yucatan Peninsula, largely due to wind shear and interaction with land. The system redeveloped as it entered the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico on August 23, where it rapidly intensified under favorable atmospheric conditions. The combination of low wind shear, high sea surface temperatures, and abundant moisture in the atmosphere provided the perfect environment for Harvey's explosive development. By August 24, Harvey had strengthened from a tropical storm into a Category 1 hurricane, and by the morning of August 25, it had reached Category 4 strength with maximum sustained winds of 130 miles per hour. Rapid intensification and landfall. One of the defining characteristics of Hurricane Harvey was its rapid intensification in the hours leading up to landfall. This phenomenon, where a tropical cyclone strengthens dramatically over a short period, has become more common in recent decades and is often associated with climate change due to warming ocean temperatures. In Harvey's case, sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico were abnormally high, providing additional energy for the storm's intensification. Harvey made landfall near Rockport, Texas, on the night of August 25, as a powerful Category 4 hurricane, bringing extreme winds, torrential rainfall, and a storm surge of up to 12 feet. The small coastal communities in its immediate path, including Rockport, Port Aransas, and Refugio, bore the brunt of the initial impact, suffering severe wind and storm surge damage. Buildings were leveled, homes were destroyed, and infrastructure, including power lines and water systems, was heavily damaged. Stalling over southeast Texas. After making landfall, Harvey's forward motion slowed dramatically, allowing it to linger over southeast Texas for several days. As it stalled, Harvey unleashed torrential rainfall across a vast area, particularly in and around Houston, the fourth largest city in the United States. The slow movement of the storm, combined with the immense amount of moisture in the atmosphere, led to unprecedented rainfall totals, with some areas receiving more than 50 inches of rain over several days. In fact, Harvey set a new U.S. record for the most rainfall ever produced by a single storm in the continental United States, with a gauge near Nederland, Texas, recording 60.58 inches. The prolonged rainfall overwhelmed rivers, bayous, and drainage systems, causing widespread and catastrophic flooding. The storm's massive size, slow movement, and the flat, low-lying geography of southeast Texas created a perfect scenario for prolonged flooding, which affected both urban and rural areas alike. Houston, in particular, experienced devastating flooding as its infrastructure and flood control systems were overwhelmed. Impact of Hurricane Harvey on Texas and Louisiana. Hurricane Harvey's impact was felt across a vast region, with southeast Texas suffering the most significant damage. The storm's effects can be divided into three primary areas: wind and storm surge damage along the Texas Gulf Coast, widespread flooding in Houston and surrounding areas, and the longer-term humanitarian and economic crisis that unfolded in the weeks and months after the storm. Wind and storm surge damage on the Texas coast. When Hurricane Harvey made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane, it brought destructive winds and storm surge to coastal communities, particularly in the Rockport and Port Aransas areas. The winds, reaching up to 130 miles per hour, caused widespread structural damage, flattening homes, destroying businesses, and knocking down power lines. In Rockport, nearly half of all structures were damaged or destroyed, and the town's historic downtown area was left in ruins. Schools, hospitals, and emergency services were rendered inoperable, making immediate relief efforts difficult. The storm surge that accompanied Harvey's landfall inundated coastal areas, flooding homes, roads, and infrastructure. In some areas, the storm surge reached 12 feet, sweeping away buildings and vehicles. The surge also damaged ports, marinas, and oil refineries along the Texas coast, disrupting the region's critical oil and gas industry. Catastrophic flooding in Houston and surrounding areas. While the coastal damage was severe, Hurricane Harvey will be remembered primarily for the catastrophic flooding it caused in Houston and the surrounding region. Houston is known for its flat topography, extensive bayou system, and sprawling urban development, which makes it particularly vulnerable to flooding. The city has a long history of floods, but Harvey's rainfall totals far exceeded anything the region had previously experienced. As rain continued to fall for days, the city's bayous, rivers, and reservoirs overflowed, flooding entire neighborhoods, highways, and commercial districts. Tens of thousands of homes were inundated, with some areas seeing water levels reach several feet inside houses. The flooding forced over 30,000 people into emergency shelters, and many more were displaced as they fled their homes to stay with relatives or friends. The flooding also caused significant damage to Houston's infrastructure, including roads, bridges, and public transportation systems. The city's two major airports, George Bush Intercontinental and William P. Hobby, were forced to close temporarily due to flooding. In addition, major highways, including Interstate 10, were submerged, hampering rescue and relief efforts. Impact on critical infrastructure and the energy sector. Texas is a major hub for the U.S. energy industry, and Hurricane Harvey had a significant impact on oil refineries, chemical plants, and energy infrastructure along the Gulf Coast. Many of the region's refineries were forced to shut down due to flooding, wind damage, or power outages, leading to a temporary disruption in fuel production and distribution. The storm caused a spike in gas prices across the country as supply lines were disrupted. In addition to oil refineries, several chemical plants were affected by the flooding, leading to hazardous conditions. In Crosby, Texas, the Arkema chemical plant experienced a series of explosions after floodwaters caused the plant to lose power and its backup generators failed. The facility was forced to release chemicals into the surrounding area, raising concerns about environmental contamination and public health risks. Death toll and humanitarian crisis. Hurricane Harvey caused at least 107 confirmed deaths, making it one of the deadliest hurricanes in recent U.S. history. Many of these deaths were caused by drowning in flood waters, while others were the result of accidents, medical emergencies, and carbon monoxide poisoning from the improper use of generators. The storm also created a humanitarian crisis, as tens of thousands of people were displaced from their homes and forced into emergency shelters. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and local organizations set up shelters in schools, convention centers, and other public buildings, but the scale of the disaster overwhelmed available resources. In Houston, the George R. Brown Convention Center became a makeshift shelter for over 10,000 people, and additional shelters were set up in nearby cities such as Dallas and Austin to accommodate evacuees. In the weeks following the storm, the recovery process was slow, and many residents were left without access to basic necessities such as clean water, food, and medical care. The flooding also disrupted schools, businesses, and hospitals, compounding the challenges faced by the affected communities. Government response and emergency management. The response to Hurricane Harvey involved coordination between federal, state, and local governments, as well as non-governmental organizations, private companies, and volunteers. While the initial response was generally viewed as effective, there were significant challenges related to the scale of the disaster and a long-term recovery process. Federal response and the role of FEMA. FEMA played a central role in the federal government's response to Hurricane Harvey. In the days leading up to the storm's landfall, FEMA pre-positioned personnel and supplies in Texas to ensure a rapid response once the storm hit. President Donald Trump declared a state of emergency for Texas, which allowed federal resources to be mobilized quickly. Once the storm made landfall and the full extent of the flooding became apparent, FEMA worked with state and local officials to coordinate rescue operations, provide temporary housing for displaced residents, and distribute food, water, and medical supplies. The agency also set up disaster recovery centers to help affected individuals and businesses apply for financial assistance and insurance claims. While FEMA's response was generally praised, There were criticisms regarding the agency's ability to keep pace with the massive scale of the disaster. Some residents reported delays in receiving assistance, particularly in remote areas or low-income communities. Additionally, the sheer number of applications for FEMA aid overwhelmed the system, leading to long waits for financial assistance. FEMA faced ongoing challenges in managing the transition from immediate disaster relief to long-term recovery, as thousands of residents remained displaced months after the storm. Texas state and local government response. State and local governments in Texas were at the forefront of the response to Hurricane Harvey. Governor Greg Abbott declared a state of emergency for 54 counties ahead of the storm, and the Texas Department of Emergency Management worked to coordinate evacuation orders, shelter operations, and search and rescue efforts. The Texas National Guard was deployed to assist with rescues, and local law enforcement agencies played a critical role in responding to the disaster. Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner faced significant challenges in managing the city's response to the storm, particularly given the unprecedented scale of the flooding. One of the most controversial decisions during the storm was Turner's decision not to issue a mandatory evacuation order for Houston, despite warnings of catastrophic flooding. Turner defended the decision by arguing that evacuating millions of residents from a city the size of Houston would have been logistically impossible and could have led to greater chaos and loss of life. In the aftermath of the storm, local governments worked to manage the recovery process, including debris removal, infrastructure repairs, and efforts to help residents rebuild their homes. However, the recovery was complicated by the scale of the damage and the fact that many areas were still underwater weeks after the storm. Local governments also faced financial challenges, as the cost of recovery far exceeded available resources. Non-governmental organizations and volunteer efforts. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and volunteers played a critical role in the response to Hurricane Harvey. Organizations like the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and local food banks mobilized quickly to provide shelter, food, and medical assistance to displaced residents. In addition, a massive volunteer effort emerged, with thousands of Texans and people from across the country coming to the aid of those affected by the storm. One of the most notable volunteer efforts was the Cajun Navy, a group of volunteers from Louisiana who used their boats to rescue people stranded in flood waters. The group gained widespread recognition for its efforts during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and during Hurricane Harvey, they once again played a crucial role in rescuing flood victims. Faith-based organizations, community groups, and individual volunteers also contributed to the relief effort, helping to distribute supplies, provide emotional support, and assist with the cleanup and rebuilding process. The generosity and resilience of the affected communities were widely praised, and the volunteer response became a symbol of hope and solidarity in the face of disaster. Economic impact and long-term recovery efforts. The economic impact of Hurricane Harvey was profound, with damage estimates reaching $125 billion, making it the second costliest hurricane in U.S. history after Hurricane Katrina. The storm affected nearly every sector of the economy, from housing and infrastructure to energy and agriculture, and the recovery process has taken years. Housing and infrastructure damage. Hurricane Harvey caused extensive damage to homes, businesses, and public infrastructure across Southeast Texas. The unprecedented flooding in Houston and surrounding areas destroyed or damaged over 300,000 homes, with many neighborhoods seeing entire blocks submerged under several feet of water. In some areas, homes remained underwater for weeks, further complicating the cleanup and rebuilding process. The destruction of homes created a housing crisis, as tens of thousands of residents were displaced and faced difficulties finding temporary or permanent housing. FEMA provided temporary housing assistance to many displaced residents, but the demand for affordable housing far exceeded available resources. Many low-income residents, in particular, faced significant challenges in finding housing and recovering from the storm. In addition to housing, critical infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and public transportation systems were heavily damaged by the flooding. Houston's highway system, which serves as a vital transportation hub for the region, was inundated by flood waters, leading to long-term closures and detours. The city's public transportation system was also disrupted, making it difficult for residents to access jobs, schools, and essential services. Economic disruption and impact on industry. Hurricane Harvey's economic impact extended beyond the immediate damage to homes and infrastructure. The storm caused significant disruption to businesses, particularly in the energy, chemical, and manufacturing sectors, which are major drivers of the Texas economy. The Houston metropolitan area is home to some of the largest oil refineries and chemical plants in the country, and many of these facilities were forced to shut down or reduce operations due to flooding, wind damage, or power outages. The temporary closure of refineries led to a decrease in fuel production and distribution, resulting in higher gas prices across the country. In addition, the flooding of chemical plants raised concerns about environmental contamination, as hazardous materials were released into floodwaters. The agriculture sector in Texas was also affected by the storm, with significant losses in crops, livestock, and farm infrastructure. The flooding of rural areas in southeast Texas caused damage to farmland and ranches, and many farmers faced challenges in recovering from the storm. The economic disruption caused by Hurricane Harvey had long-term effects on the region's economy. Many small businesses struggled to reopen in the months following the storm, and the overall recovery process was slow due to the extensive damage to infrastructure and housing. However, the Texas economy eventually rebounded, thanks in part to the resilience of local communities and the influx of federal disaster relief funds. Federal disaster relief and long-term recovery programs. In the wake of Hurricane Harvey, the federal government allocated billions of dollars in disaster relief funds to help Texas recover from the storm. FEMA provided financial assistance to individuals and businesses affected by the storm, and Congress passed several disaster relief bills to fund recovery efforts. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, played a key role in the long-term recovery process, providing Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, CDBGDR, funds to help rebuild homes, businesses, and infrastructure. However, the distribution of these funds was often delayed by bureaucratic challenges, and many residents faced long waits for financial assistance. In addition to federal aid, private insurance played a critical role in the recovery process. However, the storm exposed significant gaps in flood insurance coverage, as many homeowners were not covered for flood damage. The National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, which provides flood insurance to homeowners in high-risk areas, faced criticism for its slow response to claims and its financial instability. The program was already deeply in debt before Hurricane Harvey, and the storm further strained its resources. Climate change and the role of extreme weather events. Hurricane Harvey has been widely discussed in the context of climate change, as the storm's unprecedented rainfall totals and extreme flooding raised questions about the role of global warming in shaping weather patterns. While it is difficult to attribute any single weather event directly to climate change, scientists agree that rising global temperatures are likely to increase the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, including hurricanes. The link between climate change and Hurricane Harvey. Several factors related to climate change likely contributed to the severity of Hurricane Harvey. First, rising sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico provided additional energy for the storm, allowing it to rapidly intensify before making landfall. Warmer oceans also lead to increased evaporation, which can result in more moisture in the atmosphere and heavier rainfall during storms. In Harvey's case, the storm's slow movement and the enormous amount of moisture in the atmosphere led to record-breaking rainfall totals. While slow-moving hurricanes are not unprecedented, scientists have suggested that changes in atmospheric circulation patterns due to climate change may be making storms more likely to stall, resulting in prolonged periods of heavy rainfall and flooding. In addition to rising ocean temperatures, climate change is also contributing to rising sea levels, which can exacerbate storm surge and coastal flooding during hurricanes. While sea level rise did not play a major role in Harvey's inland flooding, it remains a significant concern for future storms in coastal areas. Implications for future hurricanes and extreme weather events. Hurricane Harvey serves as a stark reminder of the growing risks posed by extreme weather events in a warming world. As global temperatures continue to rise, scientists expect that hurricanes will become more intense, with stronger winds, heavier rainfall, and larger storm surges. In addition, the frequency of slow-moving storms like Harvey may increase, leading to more prolonged and devastating flooding. The storm also highlighted the importance of climate resilience and disaster preparedness, particularly in vulnerable regions like the Gulf Coast. Cities like Houston, which are prone to flooding due to their flat topography and extensive development, must invest in infrastructure and planning to mitigate the impacts of future storms. This includes improving drainage systems, expanding flood control measures, and adopting more resilient building practices. Lessons learned and long-term implications. Hurricane Harvey left a lasting impact on Texas and the United States, highlighting the vulnerabilities of urban and rural areas to extreme weather events and the challenges of disaster preparedness and recovery. The storm exposed significant gaps in infrastructure, flood control, and insurance coverage, prompting calls for reform and investment in resilience. Urban planning and infrastructure improvements. One of the key lessons learned from Hurricane Harvey is the need for better urban planning and infrastructure improvements to mitigate the impacts of future storms. In Houston, the storm exposed the vulnerabilities of the city's flood control system, which was overwhelmed by the unprecedented rainfall. The city's rapid growth and extensive development in flood-prone areas have exacerbated flooding risks, as natural wetlands and open spaces that once absorbed rainwater have been replaced by concrete and pavement. In the aftermath of the storm, there has been a renewed focus on improving Houston's flood control infrastructure, including expanding reservoirs, improving drainage systems, and adopting more stringent building codes. The city has also considered implementing green infrastructure solutions, such as creating more parks and open spaces to absorb rainwater and reduce flooding risks. In addition to urban planning, there is a growing recognition of the need for greater investment in coastal resilience. This includes building seawalls, levees, and other protective structures to guard against storm surge and rising sea levels, as well as restoring natural barriers such as wetlands and dunes. Reforming the National Flood Insurance Program. Hurricane Harvey also highlighted the need for reform of the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, which provides flood insurance to homeowners in high-risk areas. The program, which is managed by FEMA, has been financially strained for years, and the massive number of claims filed after Harvey further exposed its vulnerabilities. Many homeowners affected by Harvey were either uninsured or underinsured for flood damage, as the NFIP's coverage limits are often insufficient to cover the full cost of rebuilding. In addition, the program's risk assessment and mapping processes have been criticized for failing to accurately reflect the true risks of flooding in certain areas. There have been calls for reform of the NFIP to make the program more financially sustainable and to encourage more homeowners to purchase flood insurance. Proposed reforms include updating flood maps to better reflect current risks, increasing premiums for properties in high-risk areas, and providing more incentives for homeowners to invest in flood mitigation measures. The importance of climate resilience and preparedness. Hurricane Harvey underscored the importance of climate resilience and disaster preparedness, particularly in the context of a changing climate. As extreme weather events become more frequent and intense, it is essential that governments, communities, and individuals take steps to prepare for future disasters. This includes investing in infrastructure improvements, adopting more resilient building practices, and implementing early warning systems and evacuation plans. It also means addressing the root causes of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to more sustainable energy sources. At the federal level, there has been growing recognition of the need to incorporate climate resilience into disaster recovery and infrastructure planning. In 2021, President Joe Biden signed an executive order directing federal agencies to prioritize climate resilience in their decision-making processes and to develop strategies for reducing the risks of climate change to public health, safety, and the economy. Conclusion. Hurricane Harvey was a defining event in the history of Texas and the United States, leaving a lasting impact on the people, communities, and economies affected by the storm. The unprecedented rainfall, catastrophic flooding, and widespread destruction highlighted the vulnerabilities of urban and rural areas to extreme weather events and underscored the need for greater investment in resilience, preparedness, and climate adaptation. In the years since Harvey, there has been significant progress in rebuilding and strengthening the affected areas. But the storm also serves as a reminder of the ongoing challenges posed by climate change and the increasing frequency of extreme weather events. As sea levels continue to rise and storms become more intense, it is essential that governments, communities, and individuals work together to build a more resilient future that can withstand the challenges of a changing climate. Next up, number 8. Hurricane Ike, 2008. Hurricane Ike made landfall in Texas in September 2008 as a Category 2 storm, but was massive in size, bringing a storm surge that inundated the coastline from Louisiana to Texas. Casualties and damage: Ike caused 195 deaths and an estimated $38 billion in damages, making it one of the most destructive hurricanes in U.S. history. The Galveston area, still recovering from the devastation of the 1900 hurricane, was hit particularly hard by Ike's storm surge. Impact: Ike's destruction spurred debates over the future of coastal development and the need for improved hurricane protection measures. It also reinforced the lessons learned from Katrina about the importance of robust evacuation plans and resilient infrastructure. Now the rest of the story. Hurricane Ike, a comprehensive analysis of the storm's impact, response, and legacy. Introduction. Hurricane Ike was a major tropical cyclone that struck the United States in September 2008, causing widespread destruction along the Gulf Coast, particularly in Texas. Ike was the third costliest hurricane in U.S. history at the time, with damages totaling over $30 billion. The storm also left a trail of devastation throughout the Caribbean, especially in Haiti, Cuba, and the Bahamas, before making its way to the U.S. mainland. With sustained winds of 145 miles per hour at its peak, Ike was a Category 4 hurricane at its most intense, though it made landfall near Galveston, Texas, as a Category 2 storm. The storm was notable not just for its size and intensity, but for the immense storm surge it generated, which overwhelmed coastal communities and left many areas underwater. Ike's slow-moving nature exacerbated flooding, and its wide wind field caused damage over a vast region, affecting millions of people. This essay provides a detailed exploration of Hurricane Ike's formation, meteorological characteristics, impact on the Caribbean and U.S. Gulf Coast, government and societal responses, and the long-term implications for disaster preparedness, recovery, and climate resilience. Formation and meteorological development of Hurricane Ike. Hurricane Ike originated from a tropical disturbance in the eastern Atlantic Ocean that began showing signs of organization in early September 2008. By September 1, the National Hurricane Center (NHC) classified the system as a tropical depression. Over the next 24 hours, it quickly strengthened into a tropical storm, and by September 3, it had developed into a Category 1 hurricane as it moved westward toward the Caribbean. Rapid intensification and fluctuations in strength. One of the most significant features of Ike's development was its rapid intensification. On September 4, Ike rapidly strengthened into a Category 4 hurricane, with maximum sustained winds reaching 145 miles per hour. This intensification occurred over warm ocean waters and in an environment with low wind shear, providing the necessary conditions for rapid strengthening. However, Ike's intensity fluctuated over the next several days as the storm encountered variations in atmospheric conditions. On September 5, the storm weakened slightly as it encountered increased wind shear and cooler sea surface temperatures, but it remained a major hurricane as it moved toward the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands. A large and dangerous storm. Ike was notable for its immense size. Its wind field expanded dramatically as it moved through the Atlantic, with hurricane-force winds extending up to 120 miles from the storm's center and tropical storm-force winds extending more than 275 miles. This large wind field meant that Ike would have a wide-reaching impact, even in areas not directly in the storm's path. The storm's size also contributed to the massive storm surge that would later devastate the Gulf Coast, particularly in Texas and Louisiana. Impact of Hurricane Ike on the Caribbean. Before reaching the United States, Hurricane Ike caused extensive damage throughout the Caribbean, particularly in Haiti, Cuba, and the Bahamas. These islands, already vulnerable to tropical storms and hurricanes, were severely impacted by Ike's winds, rain, and storm surge. Haiti, a nation in crisis. Haiti, one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, was hit hard by Hurricane Ike, despite the storm passing north of the island. At the time, Haiti was already reeling from the impacts of 3 previous storms in 2008, Tropical Storm Faye, Hurricane Gustav, and Hurricane Hannah, all of which had caused widespread flooding and loss of life. When Ike arrived, it brought additional heavy rains and storm surge, exacerbating the ongoing humanitarian crisis. The flooding caused by Ike, particularly in the northern city of Gonaives, displaced thousands of people and destroyed homes, roads, and crops. The already fragile infrastructure of Haiti was unable to cope with the onslaught of storms, leaving many areas isolated and without access to aid. In total, Ike contributed to the deaths of nearly 74 people in Haiti, and the country faced a prolonged recovery effort as it dealt with widespread destruction, hunger, and disease outbreaks. Cuba, a direct hit. Cuba was directly hit by Hurricane Ike as a Category 3 storm on September 7, 2008, after the storm made landfall in eastern Cuba near Punta Lucrecia. With sustained winds of 125 miles per hour and a powerful storm surge, Ike caused widespread devastation across the island, particularly in the provinces of Holguin, Las Tunas, and Camagüey. The storm destroyed thousands of homes, particularly in rural areas where buildings were less able to withstand the hurricane-force winds. Ike also caused significant damage to Cuba's agricultural sector, with banana, tobacco, and sugarcane crops devastated by the storm. The storm surge inundated coastal towns and cities, and heavy rains caused widespread flooding across the island. Despite the extensive damage, Cuba's strong disaster preparedness system, including early evacuation efforts, helped to minimize the loss of life. However, the island faced a lengthy recovery process, with the government estimating billions of dollars in damages. The Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, heavy damage. Ike also impacted the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands, where the storm caused significant damage to homes, businesses, and infrastructure. The storm surge, combined with hurricane-force winds, led to flooding in low-lying areas, and many residents were forced to evacuate their homes. In the Turks and Caicos Islands, where Ike made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane, approximately 80% of homes on the island of Grand Turk were damaged or destroyed. Despite the destruction, there were relatively few casualties, thanks in part to the early evacuation efforts and the resilience of the local communities. Impact of Hurricane Ike on the United States. After wreaking havoc in the Caribbean, Hurricane Ike made its way toward the Gulf Coast of the United States, where it would cause widespread destruction, particularly in Texas and Louisiana. The storm made landfall on September 13, 2008, near Galveston, Texas, as a Category 2 hurricane, though its size and strength generated a much more devastating impact than its category suggested. Galveston and the Texas Gulf Coast, devastation from the storm surge. The most significant and devastating impact of Hurricane Ike in the United States was the massive storm surge that inundated the Texas Gulf Coast. Although Ike made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane, its large wind field and low central pressure created a storm surge typically associated with a much stronger storm. The surge reached heights of up to 20 feet in some areas, flooding coastal communities, destroying homes and businesses, and cutting off access to critical infrastructure. Galveston, Texas, A barrier island city that had previously been devastated by the 1900 Galveston hurricane, was once again in the path of destruction. Despite the presence of a seawall built after the 1900 storm, parts of Galveston were inundated by Ike's storm surge, which overtopped the seawall in some areas. The flooding destroyed homes, businesses, and historical landmarks, leaving much of the city under several feet of water. The city's electrical grid was severely damaged, and residents were left without power for weeks. The Weatehr Peninsula, located just northeast of Galveston, was even more severely affected. The storm surge swept across the peninsula, destroying nearly every structure in its path. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out, with only the foundations of homes remaining. Some residents who did not evacuate were stranded by the rising waters and had to be rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard. Houston and the inland impact. Although Houston is located about 50 miles inland from the Gulf of Mexico, the city still experienced significant damage from Hurricane Ike. The storm's large wind field caused widespread power outages, with nearly 4.5 million people losing electricity, some for weeks. The strong winds damaged roofs, knocked down trees, and caused extensive damage to buildings across the city. Flooding was also a major issue in Houston, as heavy rains from Ike overwhelmed the city's drainage systems and bayous. Some areas of the city experienced flash flooding, and several major roads were submerged. While the flooding in Houston was not as severe as in coastal areas, the city's infrastructure was still heavily impacted, and the recovery process took months. Louisiana, flooding and wind damage. Hurricane Ike also caused significant damage in Louisiana, which was still recovering from the effects of Hurricane Gustav, which had struck just 2 weeks earlier. Although Ike made landfall in Texas, its massive size meant that Louisiana experienced significant flooding from the storm surge, particularly in low-lying coastal areas. In Cameron Parish, Louisiana, the storm surge from Ike inundated the region, causing extensive flooding and damage to homes and businesses. The storm surge was exacerbated by the fact that much of the region's natural wetlands, which would normally absorb floodwaters, had been eroded by decades of human activity and coastal development. In addition to the flooding, Ike's winds caused widespread power outages and wind damage across the state, particularly in southwestern Louisiana. Humanitarian crisis and loss of life. Hurricane Ike caused the deaths of at least 195 people across the Caribbean and the United States, with the majority of fatalities occurring in Texas. While the death toll was not as high as some previous storms, the scale of the destruction and the displacement of residents created a significant humanitarian crisis. Fatalities and rescue efforts. Many of the deaths caused by Hurricane Ike were the result of drowning in flood waters, both in the Caribbean and along the Texas Gulf Coast. In Galveston and surrounding areas, some residents who did not evacuate were trapped by the storm surge and were unable to escape the rising waters. In total, 84 people in the United States lost their lives as a direct result of the storm, while many others died in the aftermath due to accidents, medical emergencies, and exposure. The U.S. Coast Guard and other emergency services conducted hundreds of rescues during and after the storm, using helicopters, boats, and high-water vehicles to reach stranded residents. In some cases, residents who had ignored evacuation orders had to be rescued from their rooftops as floodwaters rose around them. Displacement and damage to homes. Hurricane Ike left tens of thousands of people displaced, particularly along the Texas Gulf Coast. The storm destroyed or severely damaged an estimated 200,000 homes, leaving many residents without shelter. FEMA and the American Red Cross set up emergency shelters to house displaced residents, but the scale of the disaster overwhelmed available resources, and many residents were forced to stay with family members or friends. The displacement caused by Hurricane Ike created significant challenges for recovery efforts, as many residents were unable to return to their homes for weeks or even months. In Galveston, thousands of homes were rendered uninhabitable by the storm surge, and many residents faced long waits for financial assistance and insurance claims. Government response and emergency management. The response to Hurricane Ike involved coordination between federal, state, and local governments, as well as non-governmental organizations, private companies, and volunteers. While the initial response was generally viewed as effective, there were significant challenges related to the scale of the disaster and a long-term recovery process. Federal response and the role of FEMA. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, played a central role in the federal government's response to Hurricane Ike. In the days leading up to the storm's landfall, FEMA pre-positioned personnel and supplies in Texas and Louisiana to ensure a rapid response once the storm hit. President George W. Bush declared a state of emergency for Texas and Louisiana, allowing federal resources to be mobilized quickly. Once the storm made landfall and the full extent of the damage became apparent, FEMA worked with state and local officials to coordinate rescue operations, provide temporary housing for displaced residents, and distribute food, water, and medical supplies. The agency also set up disaster recovery centers to help affected individuals and businesses apply for financial assistance and insurance claims. While FEMA's response was generally praised, there were criticisms regarding the agency's ability to keep pace with the massive scale of the disaster. Some residents reported delays in receiving assistance, particularly in remote areas or low-income communities. Additionally, the sheer number of applications for FEMA aid overwhelmed the system, leading to long waits for financial assistance. FEMA faced ongoing challenges in managing the transition from immediate disaster relief to long-term recovery, as thousands of residents remained displaced months after the storm. Texas state and local government response. State and local governments in Texas were at the forefront of the response to Hurricane Ike. Texas Governor Rick Perry declared a state of emergency ahead of the storm, and the Texas Department of Emergency Management worked to coordinate evacuation orders, shelter operations, and search and rescue efforts. The Texas National Guard was deployed to assist with rescues, and local law enforcement agencies played a critical role in responding to the disaster. In the aftermath of the storm, local governments worked to manage the recovery process, including debris removal, infrastructure repairs, and efforts to help residents rebuild their homes. However, the recovery was complicated by the scale of the damage and the fact that many areas were still underwater weeks after the storm. Local governments also faced financial challenges, as the cost of recovery far exceeded available resources. Non-governmental organizations and volunteer efforts. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and volunteers played a critical role in the response to Hurricane Ike. Organizations like the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and local food banks mobilized quickly to provide shelter, food, and medical assistance to displaced residents. In addition, a massive volunteer effort emerged, with thousands of Texans and people from across the country coming to the aid of those affected by the storm. One of the most notable volunteer efforts was the Cajun Navy, a group of volunteers from Louisiana who used their boats to rescue people stranded in flood waters. The group gained widespread recognition for its efforts during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and during Hurricane Harvey, they once again played a crucial role in rescuing flood victims. Faith-based organizations, community groups, and individual volunteers also contributed to the relief effort, helping to distribute supplies, provide emotional support, and assist with the cleanup and rebuilding process. The generosity and resilience of the affected communities were widely praised, and the volunteer response became a symbol of hope and solidarity in the face of disaster. Economic impact and long-term recovery efforts. The economic impact of Hurricane Ike was profound, with damage estimates reaching $30 billion. The storm affected nearly every sector of the economy, from housing and infrastructure to energy and agriculture, and the recovery process has taken years. Housing and infrastructure damage. Hurricane Ike caused extensive damage to homes, businesses, and public infrastructure across Southeast Texas. The unprecedented flooding in Houston and surrounding areas destroyed or damaged over 300,000 homes, with many neighborhoods seeing entire blocks submerged under several feet of water. In some areas, homes remained underwater for weeks, further complicating the cleanup and rebuilding process. The destruction of homes created a housing crisis, as tens of thousands of residents were displaced and faced difficulties finding temporary or permanent housing. FEMA provided temporary housing assistance to many displaced residents, but the demand for affordable housing far exceeded available resources. Many low-income residents, in particular, faced significant challenges in finding housing and recovering from the storm. In addition to housing, critical infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and public transportation systems were heavily damaged by the flooding. Houston's highway system, which serves as a vital transportation hub for the region, was inundated by floodwaters, leading to long-term closures and detours. The city's public transportation system was also disrupted, making it difficult for residents to access jobs, schools, and essential services. Economic disruption and impact on industry. Hurricane Harvey's economic impact extended beyond the immediate damage to homes and infrastructure. The storm caused significant disruption to businesses, particularly in the energy, chemical, and manufacturing sectors, which are major drivers of the Texas economy. The Houston metropolitan area is home to some of the largest oil refineries and chemical plants in the country, and many of these facilities were forced to shut down or reduce operations due to flooding, wind damage, or power outages. The temporary closure of refineries led to a decrease in fuel production and distribution, resulting in higher gas prices across the country. In addition, the flooding of chemical plants raised concerns about environmental contamination, as hazardous materials were released into flood waters. The agriculture sector in Texas was also affected by the storm, with significant losses in crops, livestock, and farm infrastructure. The flooding of rural areas in southeast Texas caused damage to farmland and ranches, and many farmers faced challenges in recovering from the storm. The economic disruption caused by Hurricane Harvey had long-term effects on the region's economy. Many small businesses struggled to reopen in the months following the storm, and the overall recovery process was slow due to the extensive damage to infrastructure and housing. However, the Texas economy eventually rebounded, thanks in part to the resilience of local communities and the influx of federal disaster relief funds. Federal disaster relief and long-term recovery programs. In the wake of Hurricane Harvey, the federal government allocated billions of dollars in disaster relief funds to help Texas recover from the storm. FEMA provided financial assistance to individuals and businesses affected by the storm, and Congress passed several disaster relief bills to fund recovery efforts. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, played a key role in the long-term recovery process, providing Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, CDBGDR, funds to help rebuild homes, businesses, and infrastructure. However, the distribution of these funds was often delayed by bureaucratic challenges, and many residents faced long waits for financial assistance. Next up. Number 9. Hurricane Michael, 2018. Hurricane Michael made landfall in the Florida Panhandle in October 2018 as a Category 5 storm, with sustained winds of 160 miles per hour. It was the first Category 5 storm to strike the U.S. since Andrew in 1992. Casualties and damage. Michael caused 74 deaths and approximately $25 billion in damages. The storm leveled entire towns, particularly in Bay County, Florida, where the city of Mexico Beach was almost completely destroyed. Impact. Michael underscored the destructive potential of rapid hurricane intensification and the need for residents in vulnerable areas to evacuate even when a storm initially appears to be weakening. The storm led to a renewed focus on emergency preparedness, rapid response, and the importance of up-to-date building codes. Now the rest of the story. Hurricane Michael, a comprehensive analysis of the 2018 storm's impact, response, and legacy. Introduction. Hurricane Michael was one of the most powerful and destructive storms ever to strike the United States. Making landfall on October 10, 2018, near Mexico Beach, Florida, Michael was a Category 5 hurricane with sustained winds of 160 miles per hour at landfall. It was the first Category 5 hurricane to hit the continental U.S. since Hurricane Andrew in 1992 and the third most intense landfalling hurricane on record, based on pressure. The storm caused widespread destruction, particularly in the Florida Panhandle, but also in Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia. Michael resulted in at least 74 deaths and inflicted an estimated $25.1 billion in damages. This essay provides a comprehensive exploration of Hurricane Michael's meteorological characteristics, the impact on affected regions, the government and societal responses, and the long-term implications of the storm for disaster preparedness, resilience, and climate adaptation. Meteorological formation and characteristics of Hurricane Michael. Hurricane Michael originated from a broad area of low pressure that began forming in the southwestern Caribbean Sea in early October 2018. On October 2nd, a tropical wave moved off the coast of Africa, and by October 6th, it merged with another disturbance in the Caribbean, leading to the formation of a low-pressure system. As it moved northward toward the Gulf of Mexico, the system gradually organized into a tropical depression, and on October 7th, the National Hurricane Center (NHC) classified it as Tropical Depression 14. Rapid intensification. Michael began to rapidly intensify due to the highly favorable atmospheric conditions in the Gulf of Mexico. These included very warm sea surface temperatures, exceeding 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius, low wind shear, and abundant moisture. On October 8th, Michael strengthened into a tropical storm, and just 24 hours later, it became a Category 1 hurricane. The storm continued to rapidly intensify as it moved northward through the Gulf, becoming a Category 3 hurricane by October 9th. On the morning of October 10th, just hours before landfall, Michael reached Category 5 status with maximum sustained winds of 160 miles per hour and a minimum central pressure of 919 MB. Michael's rapid intensification posed a significant challenge for forecasting, as the storm gained strength faster than anticipated. While hurricane warnings had been issued in advance, many residents in the Florida Panhandle had little time to prepare for a storm of such magnitude. Size and structure. One of the notable characteristics of Hurricane Michael was its compact yet intense wind field. While the hurricane's size was not particularly large compared to other major hurricanes, its eye wall, the area of strongest winds surrounding the center, was extremely well defined. The compact nature of the storm allowed for a rapid intensification process, contributing to its destructive winds and powerful storm surge. The storm surge associated with Hurricane Michael was especially devastating, reaching heights of up to 14 feet in some coastal areas. The surge inundated communities along the Gulf Coast, sweeping away homes, businesses, and infrastructure, particularly in the towns of Mexico Beach and Panama City. Impact of Hurricane Michael on the southeastern United States. Hurricane Michael caused widespread destruction across multiple states in the southeastern United States, with the worst impacts felt in Florida's Panhandle. The storm also brought severe damage to parts of Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas, and its remnants caused flooding and wind damage as far north as Virginia. This section will explore the specific impacts on the affected regions. Florida. Devastation in the Panhandle. The Florida Panhandle bore the brunt of Hurricane Michael's wrath, particularly in the towns of Mexico Beach and Panama City, where the storm made landfall. The storm surge, combined with the intense winds, left entire neighborhoods in ruins, with many homes and businesses completely destroyed. Mexico Beach, Ground Zero. Mexico Beach, a small town of about 1,000 residents, was one of the hardest hit communities. Located just east of where Michael made landfall, the town was essentially obliterated by the storm's 14-foot surge and 160 miles per hour winds. More than 80% of the buildings in Mexico Beach were either severely damaged or completely destroyed, with many homes washed off their foundations and debris scattered for miles. Aerial footage of the town after the storm showed scenes of apocalyptic devastation, with only a few structures left standing amid a flattened landscape. The storm surge caused extensive erosion along the beach front, while the high winds flattened structures made of wood and other less durable materials. The damage in Mexico Beach was so extensive that it took weeks for rescue and recovery teams to fully assess the devastation and begin the cleanup process. Panama City and Panama City Beach, widespread damage. Just to the west of Mexico Beach, Panama City and Panama City Beach also suffered significant damage from Hurricane Michael. While Panama City Beach was spared the worst of the storm surge, both areas were pummeled by the storm's winds, which tore apart buildings, downed trees, and ripped off roofs. Panama City's Tyndall Air Force Base, located directly in the path of the storm, sustained catastrophic damage, with many of its buildings flattened or severely damaged. Much of Panama City's infrastructure, including power lines, water systems, and roads, was heavily damaged or destroyed, leaving residents without power, clean water, or access to critical services for weeks. Businesses and schools were forced to close, and thousands of residents were displaced. Rural Florida, agricultural losses. In addition to the urban areas along the coast, Hurricane Michael also devastated rural communities in the Florida Panhandle. The region's agriculture industry was particularly hard hit, with widespread losses in crops such as cotton, peanuts, and pecans. Many farmers lost their entire harvests, and the economic impact on the agricultural sector was estimated to be in the billions of dollars. The timber industry in northern Florida also suffered severe losses, as Michael's powerful winds flattened millions of acres of forest land. The destruction of timber not only caused immediate economic losses but also raised concerns about long-term environmental impacts, including increased risks of wildfires due to the large amount of downed wood. Georgia and Alabama, inland destruction. As Hurricane Michael moved inland, it maintained much of its strength, causing widespread damage across Georgia and Alabama. By the time the storm reached these states, it had weakened to a Category 3 hurricane, but it still brought hurricane-force winds, heavy rainfall, and tornadoes. Georgia, crop devastation. In Georgia, Michael's impacts were felt most acutely in the southwestern part of the state, where the storm's winds and rain caused significant damage to the state's agricultural sector. Cotton fields were particularly hard hit, with entire crops destroyed just days before harvest. The pecan industry also suffered, as many trees were uprooted or damaged beyond recovery. In addition to the agricultural losses, many homes and businesses in Georgia were damaged or destroyed by the high winds. Power outages affected hundreds of thousands of residents, and it took days for electricity to be fully restored in some areas. Alabama, structural damage and power outages. In Alabama, Hurricane Michael caused significant wind damage, particularly in the southeastern part of the state. Trees were uprooted, roofs were torn off buildings, and power lines were downed, leaving many residents without power for several days. While Alabama did not experience the same level of destruction as Florida or Georgia, the storm still caused widespread disruptions and economic losses, particularly in the agricultural sector. The Carolinas and Virginia, flooding from remnants. As Hurricane Michael continued its path northeastward, it weakened into a tropical storm but still brought heavy rainfall and flooding to the Carolinas and Virginia. These states, still recovering from the impacts of Hurricane Florence just a month earlier, were once again inundated by rainfall from Michael's remnants. In North Carolina and South Carolina, the heavy rains caused rivers to swell, leading to flash flooding in several communities. Roads were washed out, and some areas experienced landslides due to the saturated ground. In Virginia, similar flooding occurred, and multiple tornadoes were spawned by the storm, causing additional damage in some areas. Humanitarian crisis and loss of life. Hurricane Michael caused the deaths of at least 74 people, with most of the fatalities occurring in Florida. Many of the deaths were caused by drowning in flood waters, falling trees, and accidents during the cleanup and recovery process. Fatalities and rescue efforts. In the immediate aftermath of the storm, rescue efforts were hampered by the widespread destruction and impassable roads. Search and rescue teams, including local first responders, the National Guard, and FEMA, worked tirelessly to locate survivors and provide medical assistance. In some areas, residents who had not evacuated were trapped in their homes by floodwaters and debris, requiring helicopter rescues. While many lives were saved by these efforts, The storm's rapid intensification and the relatively short time frame for evacuation contributed to the high death toll. In Mexico Beach and Panama City, where the storm's impact was most severe, some residents were unable to escape in time and perished in the storm. Displacement and long-term shelter needs. Hurricane Michael left tens of thousands of people displaced, particularly in the hardest-hit areas of Florida. Many homes were completely destroyed, leaving residents with no place to return. Emergency shelters were set up across the region, but the scale of the disaster overwhelmed available resources. Many residents were forced to stay with family members, friends, or in temporary shelters for weeks or months. In the months following the storm, FEMA provided temporary housing assistance to many displaced residents, but the process of finding permanent housing was slow. The rebuilding process was further complicated by the extensive damage to infrastructure, including roads, utilities, and public services. Government response and emergency management. The response to Hurricane Michael involved coordination between federal, state, and local governments, as well as non-governmental organizations, private companies, and volunteers. While the initial response was generally viewed as effective, there were significant challenges related to the scale of the disaster and a long-term recovery process. Federal response and the role of FEMA. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, played a central role in the federal government's response to Hurricane Michael. In the days leading up to the storm's landfall, FEMA pre-positioned personnel and supplies in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama to ensure a rapid response once the storm hit. President Donald Trump declared a state of emergency for Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, allowing federal resources to be mobilized quickly. Once the storm made landfall, FEMA worked with state and local officials to coordinate rescue operations, provide temporary housing for displaced residents, and distribute food, water, and medical supplies. The agency also set up disaster recovery centers to help affected individuals and businesses apply for financial assistance and insurance claims. While FEMA's response was generally praised, there were criticisms regarding the agency's ability to keep pace with the massive scale of the disaster. Some residents reported delays in receiving assistance, particularly in remote areas or low-income communities. Additionally, the sheer number of applications for FEMA aid overwhelmed the system, leading to long waits for financial assistance. FEMA faced ongoing challenges in managing the transition from immediate disaster relief to long-term recovery, as thousands of residents remained displaced months after the storm. State and local government response. State and local governments in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama were at the forefront of the response to Hurricane Michael. Florida Governor Rick Scott declared a state of emergency ahead of the storm, and the Florida Division of Emergency Management worked to coordinate evacuation orders, shelter operations, and search and rescue efforts. The National Guard was deployed to assist with rescues, and local law enforcement agencies played a critical role in responding to the disaster. In the aftermath of the storm, local governments worked to manage the recovery process, including debris removal, infrastructure repairs, and efforts to help residents rebuild their homes. However, the recovery was complicated by the scale of the damage and the fact that many areas were still inaccessible weeks after the storm. Local governments also faced financial challenges, as the cost of recovery far exceeded available resources. Non-governmental organizations and volunteer efforts. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and volunteers played a critical role in the response to Hurricane Michael. Organizations like the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and local food banks mobilized quickly to provide shelter, food, and medical assistance to displaced residents. In addition, a massive volunteer effort emerged, with thousands of Floridians and people from across the country coming to the aid of those affected by the storm. Faith-based organizations, community groups, and individual volunteers also contributed to the relief effort, helping to distribute supplies, provide emotional support, and assist with the cleanup and rebuilding process. The generosity and resilience of the affected communities were widely praised, and the volunteer response became a symbol of hope and solidarity in the face of disaster. Economic impact and long-term recovery efforts. The economic impact of Hurricane Michael was profound, with damage estimates reaching $25.1 billion. The storm affected nearly every sector of the economy, from housing and infrastructure to energy and agriculture, and the recovery process has taken years. Housing and infrastructure damage. Hurricane Michael caused extensive damage to homes, businesses, and public infrastructure across the southeastern United States, particularly in Florida's Panhandle. The unprecedented flooding in Mexico Beach and Panama City destroyed or damaged thousands of homes, with many neighborhoods seeing entire blocks submerged under several feet of water. In some areas, homes remained underwater for weeks, further complicating the cleanup and rebuilding process. The destruction of homes created a housing crisis, as tens of thousands of residents were displaced and faced difficulties finding temporary or permanent housing. FEMA provided temporary housing assistance to many displaced residents, but the demand for affordable housing far exceeded available resources. Many low-income residents, in particular, faced significant challenges in finding housing and recovering from the storm. In addition to housing, critical infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and public transportation systems were heavily damaged by the flooding. Panama City's highway system, which serves as a vital transportation hub for the region, was inundated by floodwaters, leading to long-term closures and detours. The city's public transportation system was also disrupted, making it difficult for residents to access jobs, schools, and essential services. Economic disruption and impact on industry. Hurricane Michael's economic impact extended beyond the immediate damage to homes and infrastructure. The storm caused significant disruption to businesses, particularly in the energy, chemical, and manufacturing sectors, which are major drivers of the Florida economy. The agricultural sector in Florida was also affected by the storm, with significant losses in crops, livestock, and farm infrastructure. The flooding of rural areas in the Panhandle caused damage to farmland and ranches, and many farmers faced challenges in recovering from the storm. The economic disruption caused by Hurricane Michael had long-term effects on the region's economy. Many small businesses struggled to reopen in the months following the storm, and the overall recovery process was slow due to the extensive damage to infrastructure and housing. However, the Florida economy eventually rebounded, thanks in part to the resilience of local communities and the influx of federal disaster relief funds. Federal disaster relief and long-term recovery programs. In the wake of Hurricane Michael, the federal government allocated billions of dollars in disaster relief funds to help Florida and other affected states recover from the storm. FEMA provided financial assistance to individuals and businesses affected by the storm, and Congress passed several disaster relief bills to fund recovery efforts. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, played a key role in the long-term recovery process, providing Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery (CDBGDR) funds to help rebuild homes, businesses, and infrastructure. However, the distribution of these funds was often delayed by bureaucratic challenges, and many residents faced long waits for financial assistance. In addition to federal aid, private insurance played a critical role in the recovery process. However, the storm exposed significant gaps in flood insurance coverage, as many homeowners were not covered for flood damage. The National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, which provides flood insurance to homeowners in high-risk areas, faced criticism for its slow response to claims and its financial instability. The program was already deeply in debt before Hurricane Michael, and the storm further strained its resources. Climate change and the role of extreme weather events. Hurricane Michael has been widely discussed in the context of climate change, as the storm's rapid intensification and extreme impacts raised questions about the role of global warming in shaping weather patterns. While it is difficult to attribute any single weather event directly to climate change, scientists agree that rising global temperatures are likely to increase the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, including hurricanes. The link between climate change and Hurricane Michael. Several factors related to climate change likely contributed to the severity of Hurricane Michael. First, rising sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico provided additional energy for the storm, allowing it to rapidly intensify before making landfall. Warmer oceans also lead to increased evaporation, which can result in more moisture in the atmosphere and heavier rainfall during storms. In Michael's case, the storm's rapid intensification in the hours before landfall raised concerns about the increasing frequency of such events in a warming world. While rapid intensification is not unprecedented, it has become more common in recent decades, and scientists suggest that climate change may be contributing to this trend. In addition to rising ocean temperatures, climate change is also contributing to rising sea levels, which can exacerbate storm surge and coastal flooding during hurricanes. In the case of Hurricane Michael, the storm surge was particularly devastating because it occurred in areas with low-lying, vulnerable coastlines. Implications for future hurricanes and extreme weather events. Hurricane Michael serves as a stark reminder of the growing risks posed by extreme weather events in a warming world. As global temperatures continue to rise, scientists expect that hurricanes will become more intense, with stronger winds, heavier rainfall, and larger storm surges. In addition, the frequency of rapid intensification events like Michael may increase, leading to more destructive storms. The storm also highlighted the importance of climate resilience and disaster preparedness, particularly in vulnerable regions like the Gulf Coast. Cities like Panama City and Mexico Beach, which are prone to flooding due to their low-lying topography, must invest in infrastructure and planning to mitigate the impacts of future storms. This includes improving drainage systems, expanding flood control measures, and adopting more resilient building practices. Lessons learned and long-term implications. Hurricane Michael left a lasting impact on the southeastern United States, highlighting the vulnerabilities of coastal and inland areas to extreme weather events and the challenges of disaster preparedness and recovery. The storm exposed significant gaps in infrastructure, flood control, and insurance coverage, prompting calls for reform and investment in resilience. Urban planning and infrastructure improvements. One of the key lessons learned from Hurricane Michael is the need for better urban planning and infrastructure improvements to mitigate the impacts of future storms. In Mexico Beach and Panama City, the storm exposed the vulnerabilities of the region's flood control system, which was overwhelmed by the unprecedented storm surge. The rapid growth and development in coastal areas have exacerbated flooding risks, as natural wetlands and open spaces that once absorbed rainwater have been replaced by concrete and pavement. In the aftermath of the storm, there has been a renewed focus on improving the region's flood control infrastructure, including expanding reservoirs, improving drainage systems, and adopting more stringent building codes. The region has also considered implementing green infrastructure solutions, such as creating more parks and open spaces to absorb rainwater and reduce flooding risks. In addition to urban planning, there is a growing recognition of the need for greater investment in coastal resilience. This includes building seawalls, levees, and other protective structures to guard against storm surge and rising sea levels, as well as restoring natural barriers such as wetlands and dunes. Reforming the National Flood Insurance Program. Hurricane Michael also highlighted the need for reform of the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, which provides flood insurance to homeowners in high-risk areas. The program, which is managed by FEMA, has been financially strained for years, and the massive number of claims filed after Michael further exposed its vulnerabilities. Many homeowners affected by Michael were either uninsured or underinsured for flood damage, as the NFIP's coverage limits are often insufficient to cover the full cost of rebuilding. In addition, the program's risk assessment and mapping processes have been criticized for failing to accurately reflect the true risks of flooding in certain areas. There have been calls for reform of the NFIP to make the program more financially sustainable and to encourage more homeowners to purchase flood insurance. Proposed reforms include updating flood maps to better reflect current risks, increasing premiums for properties in high-risk areas, and providing more incentives for homeowners to invest in flood mitigation measures. The importance of climate resilience and preparedness. Hurricane Michael underscored the importance of climate resilience and disaster preparedness, particularly in the context of a changing climate. As extreme weather events become more frequent and intense, it is essential that governments, communities, and individuals take steps to prepare for future disasters. This includes investing in infrastructure improvements, adopting more resilient building practices, and implementing early warning systems and evacuation plans. It also means addressing the root causes of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to more sustainable energy sources. At the federal level, there has been growing recognition of the need to incorporate climate resilience into disaster recovery and infrastructure planning. In 2021, President Joe Biden signed an executive order directing federal agencies to prioritize climate resilience in their decision-making processes and to develop strategies for reducing the risks of climate change to public health, safety, and the economy. Conclusion: Hurricane Michael was a defining event in the history of the southeastern United States, leaving a lasting impact on the people, communities, and economies affected by the storm. The unprecedented storm surge, catastrophic wind damage, and widespread flooding highlighted the vulnerabilities of coastal and inland areas to extreme weather events, and it underscored the need for greater investment in resilience, preparedness, and climate adaptation. In the years since Hurricane Michael, there has been significant progress in rebuilding and strengthening the affected areas. But the storm also serves as a reminder of the ongoing challenges posed by climate change and the increasing frequency of extreme weather events. As sea levels continue to rise and storms become more intense, it is essential that governments, communities, and individuals work together to build a more resilient future that can withstand the challenges of a changing climate. Conclusion: the United States has faced numerous devastating hurricanes, each leaving a lasting mark on the affected regions and prompting changes in how we prepare for and respond to such disasters. I hope you enjoy this list on the most destruction hurricanes to hit the United States. Please like this video and subscribe to Weather Zone 411. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Weather Zone 411. Have a wonderful day and thank you for visiting Weather Zone 411.